Okay, you're ready to go.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October meeting for Manhattan Community Board 4. I am the chair, Lowell Kern. We are conducting this meeting via Zoom with access to the public as permitted under state legislation passed during the emergency session and signed by Governor Hochul. We are starting tonight with a presentation from the Independent Redistricting Committee. As you all know, there was a census last year and New York ended up under 100 people short because not everyone filled out their census forms. But now we have to draw new lines, and Asia Body from the New York State Independent Redistricting Committee is going to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kern. So I'm the Director of Public Engagement for the New York Independent Redistricting Commission. And, I will speak quickly, but everything I'm going to tell you is on our website, and you are welcome to sign up on our website for updates, as well as follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And we do have videos on YouTube. So you may, as the chair mentioned, that, after the census is a redistricting that happens every 10 years. The Independent Redistricting Commission is new because it's the first time that we've come together. We are a product of a 2014 ballot amendment that seeks to create a fair and transparent process to redraw the state legislative and congressional lines. So we're only focused on Congress, state assembly, and state senate. The Redistricting Commission is made up of 10 commissioners. That more information is about them on the website, their bios, but 4 of them are appointed by the Democrats, 4 are appointed by the Republican legislature, and the 4 Democrat commissioners appoint an independent, and the 4 Republicans appointed an independent. So the 10 commissioners have extensive experience about voting rights, New York State communities, and there's just, they're wonderful people, and they're really committed to this process and hearing from the public. So the task for the commissioner is to do several things. One is to submit draft plans on September 15th, which they did. They are available on our website, and I'll show you where those are available. Secondly, we're mandated to hold 12 public hearings, and the cities that we hold them on are mandated. So we're mandated, we're starting in Buffalo, we'll be going to Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and then making our way down. There will be a New York State hearing New York County, Manhattan County on November 10th, and there will be a hearing in the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and so forth. I'll show you where the hearings are available on our website and where you can sign up. And and the commissioners added 2 extra hearings that they felt were important. One's in Plattsburgh and one's in Binghamton. And then finally, they will, after all the hearings, synthesize all the information from the public and then submit final plans to the legislature in early January. It's a really tight timeline. The dates were mandated and are written into the Constitution based on prior year primaries, when the primary was in September. So we know that we're really short on that end. And secondly, the census normally gives us their data in April. This year, they gave it to us in August. So the commissioners only had a month with the data before we were supposed to release the draft plans. While they were waiting for the census data, and because the commissioners felt like they couldn't even draw draft plans without public input, we had a virtual listening tour in August. We have 9 regional meetings. All of those were recorded and are on YouTube. It's really interesting. I would say I take some time to look and see who spoke and what. And then we also submitted, asked for public feedback. We had 500 people sign up to speak at the listening tour. 300 of them actually spoke. 500 people sent in written comments, testimony, maps. We have over 1,200 pages of written comments that were submitted. All of those are available on our website too. And the commissioners did their best to synthesize that data and using the Constitution to put together those draft plans. And I would say to you, those are just draft plans. Now the commissioners are really interested in hearing from the public what they think and what their perspective is on those plans based on their community of interest. And communities of interest can be, a group of folks that are affiliated by a job or industry, or a common language, or a common area, like they might be a faith-based community that believe that they should be organized together so they can be represented by the same political district. So many, you may be part of multiple communities of interest, or you may be only part of one, and your community of interest could be within CB4, but also in CB5 too, right? So that's why a lot of it is really based on the communities to come to us and tell us who represents their community of interest and what they want to see. And finally, so I mentioned about our listening tour. I want to take a little bit of time just to quickly go through our website to show you where you can find out about our hearing. So if you don't mind letting me share a screen, I will. There. Great. So our previous submissions are available here. They're all PDF, and we organized them by the regional county where the speaking tour was, but there were also comments that we got that were just sort of general New York State comments, or submissions that were overall New York City. So that's sort of there. If you would like to sign up for a meeting, I'm logged in, so you can actually see, you can sign up to attend a meeting, or submit testimony without attending a meeting. But these are the dates of our meetings. We start October 20th in Buffalo, and we're going to be making our way down to finishing right before Thanksgiving. So we have a really busy month with these 14 meetings. The other piece that I wanted to point out to everybody is the participate tab. We're asking for comments. We're asking for people to give us their thoughts on all the different lines based on which lines they want to give a comment to, as well as which regional area, if they have one. And you can upload a file, you can submit a map, and and that map could be as simple as a Google map, or it could be more complex because we do allow these other various sort of mapping programs, and you can come to attend a meeting. So that is the major parts that I wanted to explain. And all of our public hearings will be live streamed, and there will be a virtual component. So you can attend virtually or live. And when you want to watch the live stream, it'll be available on our website right around this area here, because a lot of people have trouble finding it, and everything's recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. So I think that's it. I think I hit everything about for us there. Happy to answer questions.
Do you have any questions? All right, I will say that there is a letter to IDC representing the CB4 position that we'll be voting on later. Tui, you have a question for right now?
Yeah, after all those meetings that happened, I think by the end of November, what are the next steps? What's the compilation and assessments? What happens then?
After the hearings, we will, the commissioners will be with line drawers who are they worked with us actually on the draft plans, but the commissioners will work with the line drawers to synthesize all the other written comments that they received, as well as public hearings, and then submit final final maps in early January to the legislature. With a really tight, I know it's a really tight timeline, but I do think that it's we're working really hard to make sure that happens efficiently and in time.
At that point, the legislature can throw out the maps entirely and draw their own maps, or accept one plan or another plan, however they want to do. But it's up to the legislature to actually enact the new maps.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
What's the rush? I mean, you mentioned a couple of times it's a tight deadline.
So originally, when in 2014 that the ballot amendment occurred, that dictated actually the commission in all parts of the commission, the timeline where we hold hearings, what we do is all written into the Constitution. The timeline was based on a primary date that was happening in September. Primaries have moved up to June, and people are start petitioning, I think, at the end of February, early March. So that is where people feel a little bit pressured, because there will be people who are running to run in districts that they're not sure what the district is yet, right? So I think that's why I know a lot of people don't understand the fact that we were set up in 2014 with a different primary date, and all those timelines were set, and they're really dictated to us about those timelines. So that is that's why I mentioned it. Yeah. And I've had community boards say that, why aren't you doing more hearings? We're mandated to have a specific number of hearings, and you'll see we have like 10 staff. We don't have the funding that like the Census Bureau with the power and the staffing and funding that the full Census Bureau could give across the country and in the state. We don't have that level. And so it is a smaller, and the redistricting is a smaller institute. So.
Any other questions? All right, we'll dive into the specifics of the proposed lines for our district when we get to our letter later tonight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, next item of business very quickly is a public hearing on a BSA application 157 West 24th. Betty, are you going to do that?
No, I'm doing it.
Paul's doing it. Go ahead.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Tonight we're holding a public hearing on a zoning variance request for Board of Standard Appeals for 157 West 24th Street between 6th and 7th. The applicant is looking for a zoning variance relief to be able to build the residential building. It would be 155 foot tall building with retail on the ground floor and 26 dwelling units above. Current zoning does not allow for residential as of right, and so this is a variance making that request. It is item number 18 tonight. Chelsea Land Use Committee has reviewed it and has recommendations for the discussion. But for this purpose right now, we're just opening up for a public hearing. We do have one person signed up, one of the neighbors, Anne Marie Shanahan. So Janine or Jesse, could you bring over Anne Marie?
I don't believe she's here unless she's under someone else's account, but there is no Anne Marie Shanahan under the attendees. Anne Marie, if you were calling in on one of the phone numbers, can you press *9 and that will raise your hand and I'll be able to find you? But I don't know if she's here.
Okay. While we wait for that, if there's anybody else from the public, I see there are 25 attendees on the list. If anybody else wants to speak on this issue, please raise your hand and we'll bring you over to be a panelist. I'm not seeing any hands go up. I believe Anne Marie testified at the Chelsea Land Use Committee, so some of her considerations were put into our letter. So if she doesn't speak today, she will have other opportunities at the BSA hearings. So not seeing any movement on this, I'd like to close this hearing then.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you all.
Okay, moving into the next item on the agenda is the public session. I will turn the floor over to our first vice chair, Mr. Jeffrey LeFrancois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeffrey LeFrancois, as the chair said, and I'll be running our public session this evening. Our rules remain the same as they always do. Any member of the public that signed up before, 5 p.m. today is on a list I have in front of me, and they'll be allowed to speak for 2 minutes on a topic of their choosing. Jesse, you have the list as well. So I believe the first is Maria Diaz, Jay Lee, and Alex Mayfie. They're all going to get brought over. I'll get my timer ready.
Maria, I don't believe is with us yet, and I just allowed Jay Lee to speak. So,
Great.
Jay, are you with us? You need to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Jay.
Oh, I'm up.
Yes.
Okay. Hi. My name is Jay Lee. I believe I might have spoken here about a year ago. I represent an organization called Hack Manhattan. We're a local makerspace 501c3 nonprofit. The idea is basically we've been around for about 10 years and we've been basically holding open nights and allowing anyone who's interested to learn about things like 3D printing, software development, how to do basic electronics and soldering. We host events with the Fixers Collective where you can come in and get your old appliances fixed. And as it stands right now, we're kind of in an interesting scenario of having to find a new location with our lease ending in December of of this year. Most of our search has been in Midtown and downtown in the office. That's not my phone. And the hope is basically that we will find a new home to sign a 3 to 5 year lease for all of us to basically build up a new hackerspace and essentially have kind of a post-COVID reboot. We are currently accepting running open houses. So if you're interested in learning more about us, we're located currently at 137 West 14th Street. That's between 14th Street and 7th Avenue. And Tuesday nights and Thursday nights after 7 p.m. Anyone here is welcome to visit us, and you can see a little bit of what we do. And I'd love to get a chance to talk to you because, you know, we are a public space, and we do serve the community. So if you're interested in learning about anything technology related that's affordable, come on by, and hope everyone here has a great night.
Thank you, Jay, with 10 seconds to spare. Appreciate that. Alex Mayfie, Victory, Scherer, and Leah James.
I think Victoria is coming over now. I don't think
Great.
Alex is with us.
Okay. I'm butchering names tonight. I apologize I should have led with that. So thank you for everybody's patience. Are Leah or Patricia here, Jesse?
Yeah. Hold on.
Okay.
Victoria, are you on?
Oh, yeah, I'm on. Sorry. Was it my turn?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Hi, yes, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, great. Good evening. I'd like to bring awareness to a local public safety issue. Some background to start. On January 12th this year in Brooklyn, a police officer pulled his service weapon on a group of citizens who asked him to put his mask on. This was pre-vaccine during a spike in COVID cases at a time where all NYPD employees were mandated to wear a mask at all times. This officer's name is Artem Prusayev. At the time of the incident, Artem worked at the 84th precinct, but after the video of him pulling his gun went viral, his case was taken on by the NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau. In the spring, Artem was transferred to the 10th precinct in Chelsea, which is part of CB4. The same way that a pedophile priest is shuttled from church to church, no members of the public were alerted. It is now the responsibility of CB4 to make sure that he does not pull his service weapon again. It's been 9 months since the incident. Artem is still employed at the NYPD. There have been no updates from Internal Affairs or the 10th precinct, who claims this is beyond its pay grade. Citizens like myself who have expressed their concerns about Artem have been silenced and ignored in NYPD meetings. This culture of opacity and of protecting unhinged officers must end now. This neighborhood is not safe so long as officers like Artem patrol its streets. NYPD officers are currently mandated to wear masks when interacting with the public. What happens when a child asks Artem to put a mask on and Artem actually fires this time? Then will we all finally be outraged? I'm asking the board to join me in pressuring the NYPD to release an update as to Artem's case and in demanding he be fired immediately. I'm asking the 10th precinct to take its people seriously and to stop perpetuating a culture of harm with total impunity. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And again, under the time. Next speaker, Leah James, and then Patricia Tarkington.
Yes, Leah James.
Hi, Leah. You have 2
Hi.
minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leah James. I am the organizer director for Housing Conservation Coordinators. And I'm just here giving a quick update. First, we are open fully to the public on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9:30 to 5:30, where we're doing intakes, and folks who need legal support be able to do intakes through that way, through those days. If not, the other days can also call, and we still will service the community and tenants as such. We have a victory that just passed. We got a lot of community-based organizations, including ACC, rallied and fought to extend the eviction moratorium, which will go until January 15, 2022. And also, we are currently in the process of looking at how we do right to counsel, which was free legal services for tenants. Now it was citywide. Now we are working with groups to do it statewide at this point, which will be very exciting. And as far as in the district, we are currently talking and working with tenants that are under the 421A affordability program, which is really starting to be a hassle right now with landlords. And lastly, get ready. We will be sending flyers to the community board. We will have our West Side Tenants Conference, December 4th and 5th. And we would love for you all to attend. We have some exciting panels that will be presenting those days and workshops for people to participate. And I will be coming to these public meetings very often just to hear all the things that's happening in the community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Leah. Appreciate that. Let's see. Patricia Tarkington and is Lisa here yet? Is Patricia here yet, Jesse?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Patricia. Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi. Okay. I'm a Gotham West affordable housing tenant speaking in reference to item 23, which is a proposed board letter to HPD recommending approval of Gotham Organization's voluntary inclusionary housing application at 550 10th Avenue, also known as the Covenant Project. My concerns and comments are too detailed and extensive to fit into a 2-minute span, so I've put them into a written public statement addressed to all board members. I sent that statement to Jesse and asked that he distribute it to all members for their consideration. In summary, the board should not approve any letter which recommends HPD approve this project due to the fact that the developer is facing charges of illegal rent hikes that violate rent stabilization laws on literally all of the affordable housing leases that it has in Community Board 4. Furthermore, the developer is facing charges of constructing apartments in the Community Board 4 district and beyond, which fail to meet required accessibility standards for people with disabilities. All of these overcharge and faulty construction practices are public knowledge, have been disclosed to CB4, and are likely to be incorporated into any new project which this developer creates in this district. CB4 should not recommend approval of future projects from any developer so long as serious charges of non-compliance are unresolved. It is common sense. But somehow through the years, a Gotham organization has established such rapport with some board members that serious due diligence for its new projects simply flies out the window. No one stops to take a current snapshot of its business practices to make certain that it manages its affordable housing properties in accordance with rent stabilization laws and in accordance with the promises originally made to the board. Regardless of how fine a community partner Gotham organization might have been 20 years ago, today it is a company whose practices no longer meet its promises. Thank you for listening and for reading my concerns.
Thank you, Patricia. Lisa, are you over? I thought I saw your name.
Brought her over.
Okay.
Hi, Lisa.
Am I visible? I don't see myself. Do I look?
No, your camera's not visible.
Okay, well, that's even better. That's better. Okay. Let me start my clock. Thank you for being patient. Hi, my name is Lisa Wager. I'm the Director of Government Community Relations at the Fashion Institute of Technology, SUNY College. Our campus, as you probably know, is on 27th between 7th and 8th. We have a residence hall on 31st between 9th and 10th, which is why I'm here. So I have a few fun nuggets to share with you. We're pleased to announce that model actress and activist Amber Valletta was recently named FIT's first sustainability ambassador, furthering the college's commitment to expanding sustainability education so our graduates can and will address the challenges facing the creative industries. And while the East Coast Comic-Con is being held this week at the Javits Center, we're pleased to announce that FIT is holding our 4th annual, very popular, Diversity Comic-Con on October 15th and 16th next week. This year, of course, the event is online with lots of interactive elements. Programs will include panel discussions, a drawing contest, a cosplay pageant, a networking party, and a virtual exhibition floor. The event is free and available at diversitycomiccon.com. Many of you are already familiar with the annual Chalk FIT live art event that takes place on our 7th Avenue walls from 26th to 28th Streets each year. On October 18th and 22nd, through that period, nearly 85 BFA illustration seniors will create the chalk murals with the theme this year of the new normal, about what the students did to get themselves through the year and a half of isolation. It's the first time most of these students are creating public art, and it provides experiential learning for the students and beautification for our Chelsea neighborhood. Each year there's a theme set in the fall. They have 2 weeks to submit a sketch for the professor's approval. Then they're assigned a panel on the wall and they start rendering. So the murals will remain on the facades through the fall, and I hope you get a chance to walk by and take a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, Jesse, so long as, let's see, the individual, I don't believe Alex has joined us yet. So with that, the public session is closed.
Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, next item up is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes or questions about the agenda as circulated?
Gwen, I'm sorry, there's Matt. There's a guest named Matt has his hand raised. I mean, he wasn't on the list, but.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if we entertain that?
Sure, let's do one more.
Thank you.
Matt, are you with us?
Matt?
Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
How are we doing? Can you?
You have 2 minutes.
Hey, how are you? Good. Thanks for entertaining the last minute sign up. So we seem to have had a really quite drastic increase in the rodent issues on 48th Street. You know, it's Midtown, and I get it, but it's been so. I think a qualitative change has become a quantitative change has become a qualitative change the last few weeks. I'm wondering if we could get some help, maybe tie in with with agencies, with DOH and with sanitation. I think the problem is really quite drastic, as I say, and I think it's maybe some of the characteristics of the block. There's some quads, there's some places where they've maybe dug in, and even with some sterling efforts from the building owners there, it may just be a little bit more than any one building owner can take an action on to resolve. And I always hate to gripe, but what struck me last night, I had reason to go visit a sick friend, and I was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I've lived in New York 3 decades. I've never seen that many rats on one block at once. So I'm thinking it's helpful to address the problem now before it gets colder. Maybe they dig in and there's intrusion, and then it'll be harder to open some of the vacant storefronts and restaurants that are there. The bigger the problem. So with that, if I could just get some help on who we tie in on, that would be amazing.
I think, thank you for that, Matt. Jesse, yes,
Yeah.
sorry, I was going to say GSD. And
Matt, thank you for bringing this up to the full board. I had corresponded with another, I think, resident on the block who's actually on the board, Chris LeBron, about this. I'm happy to coordinate that. I will say though, and I said this to Chris as well, and we can take this offline, but very quickly, it takes a lot on organizing on the community's end too. So I will just say I can organize agencies, but there's a lot to deal with in terms of property owners, management companies, right, to be part of that conversation. So
garbage, Matt.
If you and Chris can help on that end and organize that end, I'm happy to get DOH representatives to come out, and anybody else that needs to come out for sure.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I can be in touch with you, Matt.
Okay, great. Just one thing, just quickly to put on, because I know no good deed goes unpunished. Our building owner, I'm not saying they're saints, but they're certainly doing everything that they can reasonably do, garbage management, things like that. So this is not to precipitate, tickets or enforcement against the building. It's, as you say, if we get a sort of a solid block plan to abate it, rather than this being, a punitive thing to any of the building owners. That's not what I'm seeking to get done.
No, I understand.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm reclosing the public session.
Okay, thanks again. All right, so are there any questions or additions or changes to the agenda? Hearing none, I'm sorry.
Move to adopt.
Thank you, Joe.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, agenda is adopted. Minutes from our last meeting. Our last meeting, as you may recall, was the end of July, and we did that in person, which seems like really ancient history now. Are there any changes to the proposed minutes of our July meeting?
Move to adopt.
Is there a second? Thank you, Tina. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. The minutes are adopted. Do we have a representative with us from the Borough President's office, either Madam Brewer or Brian? I didn't see anyone before.
Rosie's here. Rosie Mendez is here. I'm not sure.
Rosie is here.
I'm going to let her talk. I don't know if she's waiting for Gail to come or not, but I'm going to just give her the option to talk.
Okay.
Yeah, Gail is supposed to be joining us. If you just give me 1 second, I'll hunt her down, okay?
Thanks, Rosie.
Okay.
All right, who's here from our electeds this month? Is Jesse, is Councilmember Rosenthal here?
No, I don't have a representative from Councilmember Rosenthal.
Okay, I saw Senator Hoyleman.
Yes.
I did not see anyone from Senator Kruger's office. Assemblymember Rosenthal. And Representative Maloney, and I think I saw her or someone from her office.
Linda, I know, said that she'll be here, but I know Maya's here. I brought her over so she can start.
All right, well, I think Brad was actually logged in.
Oh, Brad is here. I'm sorry. I apologize. Sorry, Brad, I see your hand.
All right, let's start with Senator Hoyleman, and when the Borough President gets here, we'll slot her in. Senator Hoyleman, where are you, Brad?
Lowell, I am here.
There you are. Okay.
Yes.
Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. When I heard the mention of Comic-Con, I thought they were talking about Albany, but I guess that's at the Javits Center. Good to see everyone. It's been a few months, really, that we've been able to meet. I'm happy to say during that extraordinary session that we had, we were able to re-up virtual meetings like this. So I carry legislation in that regard, but we got it done through kind of an omnibus package of bills. But I'll continue to push my bill, which would allow this type of venue to proceed even beyond the pandemic, because I think it really has, opened a lot of opportunities for people to participate at the community board level. Second, wanted to mention that there was an MTA hearing last week that I participated in for the New York State Senate, and wanted to let you know that I asked Jano Lieber, who's the acting chair of the MTA, who by most accounts is doing a very good job, about the Penn Station redevelopment and Penn Station expansion, part of this Empire State complex that the community board has worked so hard on through the community advisory working group, and was able to ask him, because the premise of that of this project, the 20 million square feet of commercial office development, is supposed to be based on the need to provide financing for Penn Station redevelopment and the Gateway project, kind of landing pad, which is called the Penn Station expansion. And he essentially said that we need to disaggregate those kind of goals. In other words, The financing at this point isn't dependent on any real estate. As far as he was able to describe to us. In fact, they don't even have a price tag yet or a plan for either of those projects involving Penn Station and Gateway. So more on that, I think, later, but the community advisory group has really set us up nicely for what the local neighborhood wants to see should the real estate projects proceed as they were initially announced. But I'm working with my colleagues, of course, Assemblyman Gottfried and Congressman Nadler and the borough president on shaping what the community wants to see. But I do think that we should have a plan first. And I know we'll all be pushing for that before we, sign off on any large-scale development in Midtown. Secondly, I introduced legislation yesterday to counter a loophole that exists in the mayor's executive mandate on vaccine requirements. You have to be vaccinated to go to a sporting event, a theater, a concert at Madison Square Garden by showing proof of vaccination. But if you're an out-of-town performer, you don't. In fact, there have been a number who have evaded New York's vaccination laws. Most recently, Joe Rogan, who's a vaccine skeptic and a podcaster, appeared at Madison Square Garden without being vaccinated, apparently. And the bill that I've introduced will close that loophole and to require that these types of mandates be across the board. So I hope we can get that passed, but I would like to see the mayor actually take action himself and close the loophole, because it clearly is dangerous to people who work at these venues, to folks who might be fans and encounter these celebrities. Second, I think it sends a really bad message about who we're asking to get vaccinated. I mean, why should a celebrity or sports star not have the same requirements as the rest of us? Third, happy to see Broadway has opened and the lights are up. I was there to help usher in Manhattan Theater Club's new but once old production of Lackawanna Blues. Just wanted to mention that in the budget last year, I fought successfully to double the size of the New York City musical and theatrical production tax credit to $100 million to help producers get shows up. And we've had a lot of small business assistance for theaters. Of course, our federal partners, including Congressman Adler and Senator Schumer, have done amazing work at the federal level in getting funds to our struggling venues, but there's more work to be done. Fourth, it's very important that we all get our flu shots as well as get our COVID-19 jabs, in part because medical professionals are worried that we could have another spike this winter, and we don't want people who taking up hospital space if we need those beds for COVID patients. So with that in mind, we're having one of our flu shot events October 25th at the Fulton Center in conjunction with all of our elected officials. And then finally, another free event is on October 18th with Project Renewal and our partners in government. We're going to have a free mammogram screening event. That's October 18th. That'll be on 26th Street between 8th and 9th. between 9 and 4. And just a shout out to Maya, who many of you know, she's doing such a terrific job. And she's actually been promoted. I don't know if that was news since we've last met, but she's been promoted to our office as Deputy Chief of Staff.
Thank you, Brad. Congratulations, Maya. I'm going to go next to, actually, Jesse, did you have a question for Brad? Because your hand is up.
Yeah, I did. Just real quickly, Brad, just so you know, we have a letter in our packet today, which is to the governor and the state legislature about open meetings. First off, it was a very smart and appreciative move to do that in the emergency session. And what I guess the letter really focuses on is just the concern that what happened in July, in which the entire state got less than 48 hours notice to then jump back into full in-person meetings for the month and then have it turn back around, doesn't happen again in January. And so we just really hope that there's coordination and collaboration on a seamless transfer through your legislation, and then also the governor's just suspending the open meetings law.
Yeah, Jesse, I appreciate that. It's a little ironic that there was no notice given to the public about our legislation on open meetings laws, but we'll try to correct that moving forward, and I hope we can get my bill moving. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Brad. I'm going to go next to the borough president who has joined us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I am in the car, so I have to keep my mask on, and I'm between meetings as usual. A couple of things. First of all, on the open meetings law, I think you know that we too support what the community boards want in terms of something, not being last minute. Thank you, Brad, for your bill, but also figuring out how we do hybrid. I think we need to plan that in addition to everything else. And I think the OWL will help. The second thing I want to mention is today I testified about the restaurant bill, and I want to thank Community Board 4 and all the boards, because you did a great job putting together some ideas that are practical that would make sense for open restaurants and all the challenges and positive that they could produce. So it was very inspirational to have all that information from the community boards. And I want to thank you that all came out of the borough board. We are a couple of things in the district. We are going to be meeting with Chief Hughes, Stephen Hughes, Manhattan South on Business District Recovery Initiative. I know that you know that initiative as well as I do. It came about because of your instigation and the people on 36th Street and others. We've been working with Beta NYC. As you know, that's the data partner in the borough president's office, and looking at all the 311 and 911 calls related to quality of life in Community Board 4, or at least in the initiative area. So I hope that will be helpful when we actually have the meeting. I know that we're all working with 21st Street and some of the concerns that they have about open street. I'm sure that you know all about that. I keep talking about congestion pricing because I testified at your portion of the hearing, the 60th Street. I think that we have been making some headway without getting into names on having a Manhattanite who is familiar with transportation issues and community issues to be a member of that board appointed by the governor. We absolutely have to have somebody on that board who can, understand the concerns, try to address them. It's not easy being in the southern portion of the congestion pricing area. I support congestion pricing. I voted for it in the city council, but people's voices have to be heard. I do not want the cabs, the yellow and the greens, to be charged. They're already charged. And I think there are other issues that people want to bring up, but you still have to have enough money to pay for the transit issue. So it's not an easy topic, I don't think. And I'd like to know, how are they going to do the technology? Because it's not going so well on the highways in terms of collection. I also want to just mention all in the discussion of climate change. This electric vehicle discussion is just a small portion of it. I've obviously been going to some of the press conferences talking about the charging stations, but some people don't know what they are. And I think there has to be a little bit more discussion of where they are, what they are. And then of course, Board 4 is always very conscious of street furniture. And they certainly are that. Perhaps a good idea, but have to have more education about it. I think we're all concerned about schools. I'm not saying anything that parents don't know. I've only had one school in the borough that's closed completely, but an awful lot of classrooms. The one that closed completely, brilliant principal who had stockpiled devices. She only needed 14 that were not able to be in her stockpile. And we did produce them. These were children with special needs. She's an extremely wonderful principal with great teachers. And they were able to handle sort of the 10 days of quarantine. Many classrooms are closed. So I just hope that the online is working. It's something that I have great concern about. And I just have great concern about the trauma and the wraparound services that kids need in order to go back to school. I don't need to get into all the details, but I have spent a lot of time with mental health professionals and social workers since this pandemic surfaced in the schools in September. And it's hard. There is not a lot of social distancing. There is a lot of attempt to keep people safe, but social distancing is not happening, at least in the schools, that I've been to, and I have been a lot. So I hope it works well. Two upcoming events. One is, I think it's October 14th is Open House New York. Open House New York is my favorite weekend. It's always Columbus Day weekend. And what it is, you can go free to see lots of places. And in our office, we're going to be there Saturday for the wonderful John Rendell 1811 maps, which we have shown before. But this time we're going to have, if you have an area that you live in or you want an area, we will make sure that you get a copy of your area that's on the map from 1811. That's the different aspect of this year's open house in our office. And then in the Maggie Payton Gallery, which is at 1 Center Street, we had last Monday a new show opening called Welcome Back. It is phenomenal. It is art from the pandemic. So the artists have all decided what it is that meant pandemic to them, and they have created it either visually or in sculpture. And there's some amazing opportunities to relive, not that it's over, that opportunity of that pandemic, I'm sorry. And then every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, we continue to have our recovery task force meetings. I think some of you have been on them, and I have to say, every single time we all learn more. The last one was on the funding that's available for seniors with the commissioner, and then another discussion about mental health in the schools, which was very realistic. And you could see what some of the challenges are. They're very, very long in the schools. Everything from the trauma is so deep, it's hard for even the wraparound services to be able to address it, because kids are fighting more. They can't play together. Not all, but they're fighting more. They can't play together. They're definitely on their devices, hard to get them off. And they're not used to being around each other. So that all has to be relearned. Definitely need support. Thank you very much, Community Board 4. I will just also say, I think we're all working on the Empire, I don't know what to call it anymore, but the 34th Street / Penn Station / no longer Governor Cuomo's program. And I think we all should rethink about what we want, because I believe the governor's office might say to us, what exactly do we want? And we should be ready for that answer. Thank you very much.
Gail, do you have time to take a question or two?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes, Gail, you're doing so much. Unbelievable. I have two questions, but one of them is that we invited DOT to present their electric charging station some time ago, and they declined to come and present to us, saying this is not in your neighborhood, therefore we are not going to present. Anything that you can do to help us get a presentation, we'd love it.
We'd be glad to do that.
Okay, and the second thing is that what was the final resolution on open restaurants? I mean, what did
I believe, well, certainly the borough board, as you probably know, said no, and had many, many, many conditions from you and else. I only testified today. I think today was just testimony at the City Planning Commission.
Oh, that was today?
Yes.
Okay, I was not aware of that. We would have gone. Okay.
Yep, it was today. I'm sure you could still submit. It was today. I only know because I testified, but I didn't stay to listen to any final outcome. So I'm guessing that it's only today testimony.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gail.
There was a press release that came out about that, Rosie, are you still on? Rosie Mendez, I think you're the one who circulated that press release afterwards.
Hold
Gail,
on. I moved her back, so.
All right, well, first of all, we got another question from the public. Somebody's a phone number ending 543. Whoever you are, could you identify yourself if you have a question for the borough president?
You need to unmute yourself first.
That hand has been up, I think, before this session started, so FYI.
All right, well, let's, nobody there, let's bounce them. If Rosie's still around, Rosie may be able to help on that press release issue, because I got it and sent it along to Frank and Bert, but I didn't have time to study it.
I just want to give the person from the public just one more chance, just because they're.
All right.
You need to unmute yourself. It's on from your end of the phone. You need to unmute yourself to speak. Okay, I think we're.
All right, so take them out. If Rosie is still
Hello?
here.
Oh, hello. Yep.
543.
Yes.
543.
Yeah, this is Tyrone Anthony. How you doing? And how you doing, Gail?
I'm okay, Tyrone. Go ahead. I know your issue, but go ahead. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we spoke. I know you've been very busy, and I did talk to Jesse Bodine regarding some of the noise that was just unbelievable in my area with the cars were coming by. That was an issue I addressed with Bodine on the phone at some time. The other issue is that I heard from Bryant, and he said he was waiting still on the CHDC on the response, which we have not had yet so far.
Okay.
So in moving forward, I want to also thank you for, because two other tenants wanted to thank you too, and that was Lever for some of the things that, only thing we have not heard anything from CHDC since the time of July 28th that you had the meeting for us to move forward. Letter
All right,
from
Tyrone.
them whatsoever.
I appreciate it. I'll follow up, I promise. And thank you for calling. I'm sorry about that. I will follow up.
It's not your fault, Gail. Sometimes I thank you for actually, for doing what you did, because you didn't have to do it. So I appreciate, your time. You're always very active in everything. So I appreciate that. But if something can be done about this noise with these cars, with these back and forth, they're waking my seniors and disabled people up all night, on especially weekends.
Okay, it's probably, I know what you're talking about. It's pretty much borough-wide, but I will follow up. Thank you. I will follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tyrone.
Rosie, if you're with us, there was that press release that came out of the open restaurants today. Can you address that?
I don't know if I can find her. Let's see if I can find her.
Thank you. I just unmuted myself. Thank you, Jesse, for elevating me. The administration has decided that they're going to have public engagement after all the community boards have voted, after the Manhattan Borough Board voted. What's interesting is they've decided to, I think, focus on some of the testimony where the big issue has been enforcement, what's going to happen with enforcement. And they've brought this task force will have, all these city agencies. Notably missing from there is NYPD. And I know many of the district managers have told me that, during this pandemic year, they've had some success with the sheriff's office with some of the complaints on the open restaurants. So, so it's unclear, what the enforcement aspect is going to be, if it's just going to be administrative by the agencies, and, what role NYPD and the sheriff's office will have, but they are not part of the task force at the moment.
All right, thanks, Rosie. I think a couple of questions, if you don't mind, Rosie.
Sure.
Joe?
Yeah, this is for Gail. An example of how open restaurants can go wrong. Today on West 35th Street at 445 West 35th, an outdoor restaurant enclosure was installed, and as part of it, they removed 2 trees, all the shrubs, the tree guards, and they paved the sidewalk with concrete, covering the existing tree pits. I reported that to Jesse this morning, but it's the kind of thing where there's a conflict here.
God.
It's just, I mean, it's just really crazy. So
Oh my God.
if you can help us with that kind of thing.
Well, oh my goodness. All right. It takes your breath
Joe,
away, Joe.
Can you tell us the location so I could just jot it down right now?
445 West 35th Street. And there were trees, plants, and tree guards all removed, and it's paved over. Right in front of the new restaurant enclosure.
Goodness. All right, I don't know. We'll figure it out tomorrow. Jeez.
Thank you.
I don't even.
I never expected that, ever.
Me neither. Me neither.
Well, we've seen that for sidewalk cafes.
Right.
All right, Christine, did you have another question for Gail or Rosie?
Well, it's a comment that I talked to DOT about this press release consultation, and I say, well, are you going to address the rules? And they say, well, we'll have a discussion about the rules, but we are only going to talk about what is in the street. We are not going to talk about sidewalk cafes, because the sidewalk cafes are in the zoning. But indeed, they just removed the sidewalk cafe from the zoning. So we are exactly where we were afraid we were going to be, which is now we're not talking about sidewalk cafe because it's in the zoning, but it's not anymore.
All right.
Thank you, Christine. Vera, in open restaurants only.
Yes, this is also a comment, but what is happening, Gail, is that a lot of open restaurants actually have the open restaurants in the parking lane, but they also have sidewalk occupied with seating. And case an example is 20th Street between 7th and 8th Avenues. And majority of folks on the block can't even walk through that side because it's been blocked on 2 ends by open restaurants that actually do double dipping. So I think it's time for city to start looking at this a little more closely, and the do's and don'ts and the regulation and enforcement need to be in place fairly quickly, because we actually brought up this issue with NYPD as well in our task force meeting, that we see confrontation. It's not reported, but we can see people confronting each other because pedestrians are trying to walk through and being blocked by the sidewalk cafes. They're not exactly sidewalk cafes because they're using open restaurants excuse to occupy both zones. I think something needs to be done.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to look at that location, but your point is made. And the trees it takes your breath away. I don't even.
All right, guys, I'm not going to keep taking questions here. This isn't an open question forum. I want to thank Gail and Rosie for their help on this. And I'm going to go next to Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here. Good to see all of you. I wanted to respond to your concerns about open meeting laws. It took a lot. It wasn't on the agenda to begin with when we went to Albany on the eviction moratorium. It took a lot of advocating by your legislators to make sure it happened. And I don't think, for some people, they're so far removed, they don't understand the dynamics of, let's say, a community board. So we prevailed. I don't know what's going to happen going forward, but I will push for some kind of hybrid situation. But, it expires the 15th of January. So that was a deliberate, let's not make this go on forever. But I think it'd be great if community boards, sent letters, et cetera, when we get closer to the beginning of session to state, your opinion on letting there be more participation by having a Zoom choice. Transit signal priority. I've written to the DOT and the MTA about this numerous times. About bus congestion and transit signal priority means the bus driver can actually control the light so they're not stuck behind an intersection or whatever. You know, it's time it comes. This is not brand new technology, but we haven't been afforded the benefit of it. So I've been fighting for this for a long time, and hopefully all our neighborhoods will get that advantage soon. Brooklyn Fair, I know people who live in CB4 territory have expressed concern about Western beef closing. I worked on it with the owner of the Western beef property, and they have Brooklyn Fair now scheduled to open in a couple, maybe next week. And it's a full service supermarket, and they promise to keep their prices commensurate with Western beef's prices. So, you know, I hope they succeed, because not everyone wants to go to Whole Foods or Trader Joe. They want like a full service supermarket. So Brooklyn Fair opening soon. Playground survey. I did a survey. My interns were busy over the summer going to all the playgrounds in my district. And so we've written to the Department of Parks and saying, look what you need to fix. Hopefully they will respond. I too testified at congestion pricing hearing tonight. You know, I was thinking, we passed the law in 2019. It won't go into effect till sometime in 2023. $60,000 will not be worth $60,000 in 2023. And so I suggested or recommended that they, you know, peg it to inflation. I think that's a bill that we'd have to pass in the state. But, you know, I've heard from many people who are not wealthy and they need their car to go to work. So they shouldn't be burdened with if they're just trying to, you know, make ends meet. So I think I too stress the need for a Manhattan person. I'm pretty confident that they will put a Manhattan person on that board. And yeah, we need it. Not everyone will love it, but we actually need to implement congestion pricing. I have a few events I'm hosting. My annual flu shot day is October 19th from 10 to 1. It'll be at Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center. So if you would like a flu shot, please email my office. I'm doing it with Mount Sinai. You need an appointment, so please call. I'm also hosting a COVID-19 testing event on October 20th, also at Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center. So I've been hearing that insurance companies are charging in some occasions for a test, and this will be free. So, you know, that'll be good. And my most popular event is a shred day, and I'm having it on Sunday, November 14th from 10 to 2 with Senator Serrano in front of my office. So start collecting all your papers that you want to get rid of. I hope to see Kathy Hochul tomorrow. She is signing some bills tomorrow, dealing with the opioid overdose problem. I have one about ensuring that everyone who has a substance use disorder and wants to participate in medication-assisted treatment while in prison and jail will have that opportunity. It is heartless to allow people to detox without the aid of any kind of medications. This is the gold standard, and it's actually terrible that our system does not give this to everyone, especially once they leave prison. Many overdose because they're not on medication-assisted treatment drugs that reduce the craving. They don't have a program. Where would they go once they leave prison? They go to the street. You know, we need much better planning. It'll save money in the long run, but it also save lives. And we have the tools. We need to use them. Tish James announced all this opioid money, and that can be put to good use in prisons and across the city. And that's it. You know where to find me. I hope to see you all again.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for waiting. Representative Carolyn Maloney is up next. Representative Maloney?
Hi, it's actually Taylor from the Congresswoman's office. She had other meetings tonight that she had to run into, but I have her updates for you guys.
Thank you.
So in September, the Congresswoman obviously had a lot going on in DC with reconciliation and the budget and Build Back Better.
Hello?
Beautiful job.
Oh, shut up.
All right. Sorry. The Congresswoman believes that we need both bills to deliver, and she was in tense conversations with Speaker Pelosi and Progressive Caucus Chair Jayapal about negotiations. They're back to negotiating and are hoping eventually they'll be able to find something to agree on. The House Oversight Committee, which the Congresswoman chairs, marked up $12 billion to electrify the USPS and federal vehicle fleets. They also marked up $60 million in funding for the National Archives to clear the backlog of veterans' records requests, providing $4 million in funding to implement the Justice 40 initiative, and $50 million in funding for the Inspectors General and Government Accountability Office to ensure funds are spent appropriately. In terms of the Financial Services Committee, which the Congresswoman is also on, they marked up a portion of Build Back Better, primarily focused on housing. The Congresswoman hopes that substantial dollars to address the housing problem are included in new negotiations so we can fix the various problems facing public housing residents. The Congresswoman's newsletter also went out tonight with additional updates with more local stuff available. If anyone needs access to that, I will send it to them. As always, reach out to me if you need anything. That's it.
Thanks so much. Any questions? All right. I'm not seeing any hands. All right, so we move next to the district manager's report. Jesse.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, give me one moment. So I'm Jesse Bodine, the district manager for Community Board 4. Very quickly, I'm going to go over, I think, three major items. So most importantly, it is the time where Community Board 4 does its statement of district needs and budget requests. So we have multiple ways for the community to engage in this process. One is an online survey that we sent out last week and again this week, and we'll continue to send out. It's very short, but I think it gets right to the point. And we've already had over 200 people answered, so that's great. We'd love to get more, and we'll continue to get more, but that's one way, and that will be on our website, and will be on other news blasts that we send out. You can also go to any of the committees this month, which the budget statement of district needs and budget requests will be on the agenda, and they will be discussing their priorities that they will be submitting to the budget task force. So if you have a particular interest and you would like to advocate for a particular budget item or a particular need that you think we should highlight, please attend that committee. And then finally, our budget task force meetings, and I'll go hit on those dates in a little bit, but we're going to have 2 budget task force meetings this month, so those are open to the public as well. I don't think I need to go over open meetings law. I think that was pretty much discussed thoroughly already, just that there's a letter in your packets. And all of our meetings will be virtual, at least until January. And then very quickly, Chelsea Land Use Committee has received an urban planning fellow from the Fund for the City of New York, Derek Brennan from the Columbia University, and we'll be studying and producing a report and presentation on best practices for residential conversion of commercial property, and he'll be working under the Chelsea Land Use Committee, but I'm sure we'll be collaborating well with the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee as well. In terms of October's committee schedules, there's some changes, so I just want to make sure everybody's aware of them. Arts, Culture, Education, and Street Life Committee will be meeting on Wednesday, October 13th. That's the same night as Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use. So we will be meeting on a different platform. It'll be WebEx. And then, like I said before, Budget Task Force, its first meeting will be on Thursday, October 21st at 5 p.m. Then the following week, it will be meeting at Wednesday, October 27th, again at 5 p.m. Nominating Committee, which is again also a public meeting, and you'll be hearing from the chair of the Nominating Committee shortly. We'll be meeting on Tuesday, October 26th at 6:30 p.m. And then finally, we have a forum that we are hosting with Community Board 5 on mental health, and that'll be Thursday, October 28th. All other committees are meeting at their regular scheduled times, and that is my report.
Thank you, Jesse. As Jesse alluded to, it is that time of year again. The way our bylaws are written, we have to have elections every year. And we do that by way of having a nominating committee. So I'm going to turn this over now to the chair of the nominating committee, Mr. Paul Devlin.
Hello, everybody again. Yeah, as Lowell pointed out, the elections every year, and the unique thing about this year is that because of the term limits we set on our officers, every seat for the executive committee is now open. The process is that the nominating committee is formed in September, and that includes me as the chair. We have Dolores Rubin, Bert Lazarin, Christine Bertay, Sabrina Reverend, Kit Tollerson, and Hector Vasquez are all members of the nominating committee. Applications will be sent in to us now. As Jesse pointed out, on October 26th, we will be interviewing all the candidates. At the November meeting, we will present the list of nominees for all the offices. Anybody who wants to be nominated from the floor at that point could also be nominated at that point. But at that meeting, nominations will close, and then we will vote on the officers in December. So as of today, we have one person for every seat on the executive committee. So chair, first vice chair, second vice chair, and the two co-secretaries. We have applications in for each of those seats, which is great. But if anybody else is interested in running and maybe making for some fun competition and a little more raucous election, you still have the opportunity to do so. Please send information to me and Jesse and be prepared to be interviewed on October 26th. Anybody else has any questions? I'm available at any time.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions? Okay. For the chair's report, I've got to switch screens here. Small meetings and small and ongoing meetings. We've already referenced the Empire Station Complex Working Group that continues to meet. Actually, we haven't met in a while because we submitted, the working group members that were not ESD submitted all of our recommendations to Empire State Development. Then Governor Cuomo resigned, and Governor Hochul is reviewing our recommendations with ESD. We were supposed to meet this past Tuesday to get the lay of the land from them and see what they wanted to say, and they postponed that meeting because they're not ready to discuss it with us. I have heard off the record that they were very receptive to our comments, but the future of this plan still hangs in the balance depending upon what the governor wants to push. The Port Authority replacement is in much better shape. We're in the EIS process. The working group members are still on top of this and continue to meet with Port Authority as appropriate. That includes meeting with them about the High Line extension, which has been approved and is in process. There are some tweaks that we are making to that plan that we expect ESD and Port Authority to go along with, but that is proceeding apace. The Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee had initial meetings regarding 707 11th Avenue and 725 10th Avenue. The Chelsea Land Use Committee, now this is a good one. As you may recall, there was a whole debate and vote about the buildings at the corner of 14th and 9th, where there was some new construction that was planned. But the problem is that the buildings on the street are landmark sites. DOB came to us this week. And what we found out when we went to DOB is that there are problems that the developer is having in terms of demolition of the building, and it's affecting the walls that were designated by LPC to be maintained. So we had a meeting with LPC and DOB, and told them that this doesn't fly. DOB's interest is solely in quote unquote public safety. So there's a sidewalk shed up now, and LPC was difficult to say the least in terms of, stating what they will force the people to do in terms of preservation. We push them. We are trying to meet with the developer, and we have a letter that we're voting on tonight. Paul, you're nodding. There's a letter we're voting on tonight. No, it's not ready yet. We decided to wait until we talked to the developer before we wrote a letter.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk to the developer. We can send that letter without having to wait for full board because the board is already on record. We can send it as an administrative letter because we are going to continue to demand that as much of the existing structures be preserved or rebuilt using original materials as possible. Finally, and this will come up in the letters, but I just want to note that the Clinton Hell's Kitchen land use meeting for September was held last week, a rather raucous one-sided meeting about the Mta site, where we made it clear that the plan that the developer was presenting was basically dead on arrival, but that letter will come up later. That is it for my report. If there's nothing else, we're going to move into a business session.
Can I just quickly let the gentleman who has his hand up from the public know that as we move into the business section, we're not taking any more public testimony at this point. So I'm going to lower his hand for him.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. All right, so we move into the business session and we start with the Business License and Permits Committee. Frank and Bert, the floor is yours.
Okay, it's going to be me tonight because I think Bert is somewhere with a really bad internet connection. I'm going to ultimately suggest we bundle all 16 items as we used to when it was live, or I guess the proper terminology is say not break any out for discussion unless people have questions. But I first want to make just a couple quick observations. First, items 1 through 10 were actually voted on by the BLP committee at our August meeting. They did not come before the full board because the September meeting gets canceled. So that is why the list looks so long today. Items 11 through 16 were heard by BLP in September. Just a couple quick things about some of the items. Agenda item number 4, 714 9th Avenue. One of the additional stipulations got left off. We also stipulated that they can stay open till 4 a.m. on Sunday nights that precede Monday federal holidays. So that's an additional stip that should be there. And then I have 2 comments about September items that are chiefly for the BLP committee. At the BLP committee, there were serious concerns about items 10 and 15, chiefly because the applicant would not agree to a couple of changes that the committee thought were important. So the committee took conditional votes saying we would recommend denial unless the applicant subsequently changed their mind about these issues. And I'm happy to say in both of them, the applicants agreed to what we wanted. So the BLP recommendations are now unanimous recommendations of approval. So that is an item 10, 575 8th Avenue. Christine will be happy about this. They had a massive outdoor dining structure that really took up a lot of space on the sidewalk extension that was really overcrowding things. We asked them to agree to reduce that sidewalk shed in depth by half, and they've now agreed to that. And then item 15, which is a private event space at 505 West 37th Street. This is on the ground floor of a residential apartment building, and they wanted to use an outdoor terrace, which was immediately below, hundreds of apartments. They have now agreed not to use any outdoor space. So again, our recommendation on 15 is now unanimous for approval. Happy to take questions on any of these.
All right, I'm just going to state that since we're online only, we're going back to our online only voting rules where we're going to do one roll call at the end for everything. But if there are any questions for Frank about any of the BLP items, now is the time to ask. Katie.
Thanks. I just want to make sure, Frank, that I understand. So
the letters 10 and 15 right now say recommend denial unless, but you're saying we should vote in favor of them because they're going to be changed to approve. Is that right?
Oh, no. Virtually all of our letters are deny unless, because they're deny unless the stipulations are included as terms of the license. So I used approval for shorthand, but we never actually issue a letter saying we recommend approval. It's either deny completely or deny unless the stipulations are part of the arrangement. So what is on the website now is correct and accurate. They were just sort of changed since the BLP meeting to reflect the changing facts and the conditional vote of the BLP committee.
Frank, for clarity, those two letters were originally just outright denials.
One was a very tight mixed vote, and which was 15, and 10 was going to be an outright denial.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the BLP items? Okay, thank you, Frank. Clinton Hell's Kitchen land use. This is the MTA site letter. JD.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My screen keeps freezing, so I'm going to ask Joe if I freeze just to continue on. This is the MTA site. It's on 9th Avenue between 53rd and 54th Street. It has been mixed up with the board for 15 or 20 years. It was part of the Western Yards rezoning where the city agreed to make that site and another site on 10th Avenue called the DEP site on 48th and 49th for moderate and middle income housing. This was in exchange for the extremely high density of Hudson Yards and a lot of low income. They would not put moderate or middle, and they finally agreed to put some up here. It was a contentious discussion among the community, but we all finally came to an agreement. About 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, it came to our attention through a press release that the city had completely reversed that agreement. Thank you, Jeffrey LeFrancois. I think he first saw it in a local paper and alerted us about it. We have tried to have discussions with HPD, that's Housing Preservation and Development, for a couple of years. They have sort of rebuffed us. And in fact, we learned Thursday that the developer had been discouraged, that was his word, from engaging with the community board. This is nuts. And as Lowell said, it was a fairly long meeting. I apologize. We got a placeholder letter to everybody, and we finally got the final letter to everybody today. Thanks to Joe and Savannah and in his office for compiling this long history of engaging with the city to get this site developed. The proposal was for 112 units, all almost all low income and homeless referrals. So the community and the board is saying basically four things. You must stick to the agreement. We have a lot of low income and supportive housing. In fact, we have probably more than our fair share, and we will continue to do more. Thirdly, you must engage with the community and the board to develop a site that will work. And fourthly, we're open to continuing discussion to get this right. Joe, I know you've been with this since 2005, or perhaps. And if you could, am I frozen?
No, you're good, JD.
We can hear you,
Okay.
but
Your screen's frozen, but we can still hear you.
Gotcha. Thank you. So Joe, if you would please give us a little history for new members of what we have gone through for the past 20 years with the city.
So I just want to note, including the Dropbox, was a presentation that was done for the Land Use Committee. Please look at that at your leisure. And then we took parts of that presentation and incorporated it into this letter. We felt it was important to detail exactly the back and forth we've had with the city of New York on this site. It actually started in 2001 when we started with Hudson Yards, and the site was repeatedly brought up as the city of New York asked the community board to identify public sites for affordable housing. And we continually brought this site up as a possible space for affordable housing. In Hudson Yards, HPD informed us that because of the zoning changes with the voluntary inclusionary housing, that the majority of low-income housing, that is housing for persons below 60% of AMI, would be produced through the voluntary inclusionary housing program. And in fact, that has happened. We have over 2,600 units produced. And of those affordable units, roughly 68% have been for, or 66% have been for below 60% of AMI. The riddle was, how do you get moderate middle income housing? Because we've always wanted in our district a range of incomes. And the city said the way to do it is they'll use the public sites. So as we did the Hudson Yards rezoning, and then we did the West Chelsea rezoning and the Western Rail Yards rezoning, the map we created back in '01 was used every time to come up with sites for moderate middle income housing. Those sites that have been developed so far have been the site at Elliott Chelsea at 401 West 25th, at Fulton Houses on West 18th Street between 9th and 10th, and the Gotham West site. The other two sites were the DEP site and the MTA site. And actually, by the time we got to the Western Rail Yards rezoning, the city no longer was negotiating. They included those two publicly controlled sites as part of the ULURP and the rezoning for the Western Rail Yards. We worked with the city on the Western Rail Yards, came up with a full package of housing issues and affordable housing production. We included an SRO preservation through supported housing at that for 150 units of very low income housing at our request. And the DEP and the MTA sites were for moderate middle income housing. Basically, the city went silent on this after it was adopted in 2009. We fast forward to 2015, we have a new mayor. We write to the new commissioner of HPD, Vicki Bean, multiple times asking to engage on this RFP. And then we do our affordable housing plan starting in 2015. And we continually write to HPD asking, we'd like to talk to you, we'd like to engage with you, what do you do, what do we do, how do we do it? A key point that JD mentioned was community agreement. In 2009, there was an agreement specifically that the height on the site on West 48th Street, the DEP site, would be no more than 77 feet. On the MTA site, it would be no more than 85 feet on the avenue and 99 feet in the mid-block, because both of these sites are in the preservation area of the Clinton Special Zoning District. So there's a lot of concern that even developing affordable housing, we can undercut those regulations which protect people across the preservation area, which goes from West 43rd to West 56th Streets, west of 8th Avenue over to a mid-block between 10th and 11th. We agreed, and in the Western Rail Yards Points of Agreement is a specific call out that the units will be under 165% of AMI because we want it moderate and middle income. They'd be 50% more or more 2 bedrooms. They'd be permanently affordable. They could not be used for any sort of inclusionary housing bonus. And most important, that HPD will share the program overview with MCB4 before releasing the RFP. So that's why we kept writing saying, consult with us, talk to us, talk to us. Multiple letters we wrote regarding this. We expressed in the housing plan a more specific breakdown of AMI bands. We did that over and over, and then we met with the city talking about the RFP.
Joe, can I interrupt? Joe, I want to interrupt you. I want to interrupt you for 1 second. I just want to make a point because it becomes relevant. The chair of Manhattan Community Board 4 at the time that the points of agreement was entered into was Corey Johnson, who is now obviously our representative and the speaker of the city council, who has been taking the side of the city on all of this, but I'll let Joe get to that.
So we then fast forward to 2018, and we have a public meeting at the Land Use Committee with HPD presenting. And they present, and they, for the first time, mention, yes, we're doing moderate middle income housing, but there must be a homeless component. There's a lot of back and forth about that. The community board understood, and that would be a 15% homeless component. And they HPD at that point specifically said, with this RFP, please put together a presentation and information that can be incorporated by reference into the RFP, which it was, and it's very detailed, and it's part of the links of this letter. that detail the various income bands and everything else about the height on the building. Then the RFP was issued. In the normal process of an RFP being issued, what happens is that there'll be a conference of bidders, they ask questions, and there's a response. There were three, the city issues basically addendums to the RFP. That happened. In those addendums, in the middle of the summer of 2018, a question was raised by a developer, is supportive housing possible at this site? And HPD responded, yes. Our board wrote in August of 2018 saying, reminding everybody of the commitments, everything that happened. And we did not hear anything from August of 2018 until we learned by press release that in fact, now HPD was awarding this site to a supportive housing project, and it would be majority low income with no moderate or middle income. That creates a huge pile of consternation. And from that point in 2019 until we have only had one meeting with HPD about this site. We kept asking the speaker's office, we'd like to talk about it, we'd like to engage with it, to understand what's going on here. We ended up in a meeting in August of 2020 with the speaker's office, at which he asked the community board to all work together and come up with some sort of compromise on this site. From end of August 2020 until September 6th of 2021, we did not have any communication with HPD whatsoever. Beginning of this month of September, we got a briefing and we learned that the project was now 94 units of housing below 60% of AMI out of 112. And 67 of those units would be for homeless referrals. So it's an entirely different project from everything that was committed and agreed to. We also saw in that period of years in between, the city kept saying there were different rationales as to why they did this. The first one is they talked about supportive housing, and it's an important need for the city. As most board members know, we have 2,043 beds of supportive housing in our district, 60% of which are homeless. We have supported supportive housing since 1991 in the Deakins administration with the conversion of the Times Square Hotel on 43rd and 8th. So we are a supportive housing supporter, and we frequently say yes when they come. The issue is, it's not at this location because this was a moderate middle income site. We've also been told that the homeless crisis is much worse today. So we looked specifically into the city's own stats, and the homeless crisis is horrible, but it's pretty much stayed around between 55 and 58,000 people annually who are homeless. So the crisis has not changed. We see it, it's worse, it's managed horribly, but it's not very different than it has been. And the last part that was very difficult to understand is the city kept saying to us, HPD, times have changed. We're no longer the last administration. We don't do this moderate and middle income housing. We focus on low income housing. In fact, we have gone to the city's Housing Connect website, which everyone is very familiar with. And there are currently 29 locations throughout the city, 29 buildings with 674 units that are being marketed to families and households between 110% and 165% of AMI, the very moderate and middle income households that we expected and were committed to at this site. More unbelievable is at 241 West 51st Street, the Capitol Apartments on the east side of 8th Avenue and 51st, there are 28 apartments available between 130 and 165% of AMI. It is clear that the city of New York just has decided not to honor its commitment, nor to build moderate and middle income housing in our district, but is totally willing to build it throughout the city in neighborhoods such as Forest Hills, in Bushwick, all over the Bronx, but not here. This was difficult enough to discuss because the discussion tried to be free focused, that we were all about supportive housing, how we need it, and our community was against it, which is just not accurate. One day before the meeting, we were sent a presentation by the developer regarding the overall project. In that presentation, we discovered less than one day before our first public discussion that almost the entire block between West 54th and West 53rd, 8th to 9th Avenue was proposed to be rezoned from a residential zone of R8 to a commercial zone of C62. The buildable FAR would not change, but the use would, and many other buildings would be affected. Additionally, a new special permit was proposed under the zoning to allow a building to cover more of the lot and have higher lot coverage. These are two items that will be applicable throughout our special zoning district, and they could affect us dramatically in other locations. So it is not uncommon as we work together that a project for affordable housing or other public need comes to the various zoning issues. We normally sit down with DCP, with HPD, whatever agency, and figure out how to make the changes to implement them. None of that happened here, and it is totally unprecedented. The rezoning of a block from R8 to C62 has not happened since the district was established in 1973. It's the first time. Over 130 people attended our meeting. There was quite a lot of people speaking. There were maybe 4 to 5 people who spoke in favor of the project, mostly who were clients or employees of Housing Works, one of the sponsors. The block associations unanimously have been against this location for anything but moderate and middle. We want to make clear in our letter that we support supportive housing, we support homeless needs. We have huge facilities for homelessness throughout our district, but we cannot cluster them in this part of the district because anything we try to achieve with the rezonings of Hudson Yards and Western Rail Yards, which I want to know for new members of the board, have the densest zoning in the entire 5 boroughs of the city of New York. And that's the reason we were able to accomplish, negotiate such a strong affordable housing package to mitigate that incredibly dense zoning. That the affordable housing that was designated there should be built as designated and worked through step by step. In the end of the day, both the city has said that our neighborhood should be economically mixed. It is noted in the various points of agreement that it's about an economic mixture, but flatly, this administration has decided to ignore both that commitment and the desire to have a healthy city, to have this broad range of incomes, low, moderate, middle, which we as a community board have been incredibly committed to. So therefore, the committee voted unanimously that the current form of the project is not acceptable and that it cannot move ahead as currently proposed. Thank you for this very long discussion, and we'll take any sort of questions to understand where this started and where we are today. Thanks.
All right, let's start off. Paul, go ahead.
JD and Joe, thanks so much for this letter. I read through as much of it as I could this evening. I think there was one point that was raised at the meeting that wasn't included in the letter, and that is about the sort of the cherry picking of the terms of the agreement. Most notably that they're taking advantage of the height that we've allowed to get on the street portion of the development. So they're increasing the height on the street side, yet they're ignoring the middle income housing component. So if it's all right, JD, I'll send you a draft statement that I'd like to have inserted probably in the 280s, 290s of the letter.
Good point, Paul. Yes, please.
Thanks, Paul. Jeffrey.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, JD and Joe. And JD, I had forgotten that I forwarded that random notice of this being in a paper. So I'm glad that happened when that did. A couple of comments and a suggestion, if I may. You know, we're not here to debate income band structure, but I do want to note that an 80% AMI income band is the starting salary for a nurse, a teacher, or a firefighter. And for years, the sort of approach to the housing of 80 to 165, folks often think that's for starting salaries of our civil servants, but it's often not. So I just want people to realize that low income doesn't always mean somebody we wouldn't think of not with having a really good job and what we might consider having a well-paid job. So that's an income band issue that we've long debated on this board, but it's not in our purview tonight. I want to strongly suggest that the fact that the MTA is requiring 30,000 square feet of office space in this building be moved to the beginning of the letter. If that was not a requirement, I think the tenor of the discussion and our negotiations may be in a very different place today. Because Joe, as we talked about, and anybody can do the math, 30,000 square feet of office space, when you break that out for apartments, even in 2-3 bedroom apartments, which is what we advocate for families, that's a lot of additional units we could get in this building. So I think we need to put that closer to the top of the letter. I think it doesn't show up until page 5 or 6 maybe. And I think it's a really important point that we need to continue to dig in on. And it will give us leverage, I think, in other negotiations we have ongoing with the state. And then a bit of language suggestion, page 5, lines 207 to 210. I recommend striking the YIMBY and NIMBY language and replacing it with the following. MCB4 has a long history of approving supportive housing developments as far back as 1991 during the Dinkins administration. I think just removing NIMBY and YIMBY, right? We repeat throughout the letter that we have a long history of supporting all bands of income of affordable housing development. As soon as you insert YIMBY and NIMBY, you invite inappropriate and unwanted criticism one way or another. So I think we're just stating a matter of fact. We have a proven track record of supporting supportive housing.
Good suggestion, Jeffrey.
I think that's somewhat of a friendly amendment, right, JD? Is that something we can accept?
Yes, yes. That's acceptable. That's very good.
Okay. Those are my two real comments. If we can consider finding a way to move the MTA factor a little bit higher up into the letter, because I think it is important to call out, as I think it gives us a negotiating point going forward as well.
Thank
just
you,
one
Jeffrey.
note.
Good, very good.
And Jeffrey, just one note, you're correct about some of those starting salaries for civil servants. However, civil servant households, you double that salary.
Absolutely.
And those people are immediately excluded. And
Yes,
that's the
Joe.
problem.
And one of the things we talked about is like people that are coming to Hell's Kitchen and then they start a family, right? Like that's a thing also. So
Like they're
getting
totally
people
screwed,
that
right?
route here,
Right.
they move in single or with a roommate and then they start a family. That's key as well. So just sometimes we say low income and folks don't understand that means $70,000 a year sometimes. And that language I think needs to be called out. So thank you all for this letter.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Roberta.
Sure. I firstly just wanted to echo exactly what Jeffrey said on the commercial zoning piece. I think it's incredibly important here. I also wanted to put forth, I guess, what I would describe as likely a friendly amendment based on what has been discussed here. Firstly, I understand and really appreciate the sentiment and the way that when the city doesn't uphold an end of its agreement, that it really damages trust between the city and community. However, I'm a little bit concerned that the letter, while stating the past support for supportive housing the board has had, is somewhat more ambiguous on the board's future support for supportive housing in the district. And I was hoping that the board would be open to some clarifying language that would state that it would be supportive of other supportive housing sites in the district, while noting that this was a clear breach of a hard-fought commitment for the city. I think it's worth noting, we do have a homelessness crisis. It's very visible on the street. Some of the claims that the city was making are dubious, but I don't think that erases that, and that we need to get to a space of yes and on supportive housing. So yes, in this district, and yes, other districts need to be pulling their weight in terms of supportive housing beds, but saying no to future supportive housing is not going to help that at all.
So the letter doesn't say that, but I think we can clarify that by saying.
Hey, guys, one of you time, please.
Sorry, sorry, Joe, just as, Roberta, that's a very good suggestion. I think we can put in that we just committed to 75 units of supportive housing in the slaughterhouse. We're still working on that, and we certainly can put some language that we need to find supportive housing that are in appropriate locations in the neighborhood that work with the community and the district. So good suggestion. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that we should know, I thought we did, continue to support supportive housing, sensitively and appropriately cited, that kind of thing, because that's our issue about planning, not just saying dump here or dump there.
Yeah, if I could just, I am forgetting the exact page. There's this language that says supports, and it's sort of a present tense rather than a past or a future tense. And I felt that that was ambiguous. To utilize the future tense in supporting supportive housing in the future, I think would be a helpful addition and hopefully one that the board can agree upon.
Great, good suggestion, Roberta.
Les?
Yes, Joe, I have a question about the provider. It's been noted before that Housing Works is one provider that's being used for the facility. what impact can we have on the selection of the provider, inasmuch as Housing Works had a spotty history in how they treat their staff, the terminations, the union breaking, and all those kinds of activities that the New York Times listed 2 years ago in their article. So I throw that out as a question. What influence can we have on the provider selection?
So I think the issue we have here is the development team in front of us includes this provider. And I would like us not as a board to get immediately mired down in the provider's performance until we know what the hell the project can be, and then go to that step next, Leslie. That would be my thought and direction.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops, Viren?
Hi, thank you. Just a couple of quick points that I want to make. Jeffrey's point about service sector income levels, that's the sort of group that we're talking about when it comes to this particular location. So we have to keep in mind that the service sector folks live in outer boroughs, and it might not be such an unwelcome sort of opportunity to provide housing for those folks. How do you manage to do that? I don't know, but there must be some instruments in place, the qualifiers, or whatever you want to call them. That's one suggestion. The second thing is, this is exactly an example of NIMBY, isn't it, right? I mean, if you really think about inclusionary housing, the mandatory or the voluntary, many of those areas are mapped in outer boroughs, increasing the concentration of poverty. And we are okay with that. But when it comes to our own backyards, we basically are saying not here. And I think we should recognize that the world has changed tremendously over the last year and a half, following the protest and the pandemic. I think if we really want to talk about equity and we want to talk about inclusion in our community, I think we should look at this kind of projects a little more carefully and not simply throw them out of the window, saying that not here, put it somewhere else. So my personal take on this is very particular, but when it came to Hudson Yards, we allowed gerrymandering to appropriate funds through visa programs and whatever have you that were meant to be for West Harlem and other places to be utilized for the development of Hudson Yards. But when it comes to city using the public land to provide housing for particular communities of lower income groups or whatever have you, we are actually objecting to that. And that is very troubling. World has changed and we need to sort of take that into account moving forward.
All right, Joe, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I have to respond to that because that's backwards from where we started with this. It was HPD and the city of New York who directed the moderate middle income housing to the public sites, totally counterintuitively, because the regulations they put in for the production under voluntary inclusionary housing created the low income housing on the private sites throughout Hudson Yards and West Chelsea. This is not something we actually started, Viren, with what you said. HPD came to us and said, no, if you want the broader range of incomes, it must go on the public sites. And the example I can use in terms of equity is the project that Clinton Housing did on West 53rd Street between 10th and 11th Avenues, 103 apartments for moderate and middle income. There were 60,000 applications for that. It had the highest number of people working civil servants who applied. And the majority of that building are people of color who are in those income bands. And they are so thrilled to have apartments that are closer to their jobs as opposed to in the outer boroughs. So unfortunately, from a sort of general point of view, you're correct. Public sites should produce the lowest income housing. The city of New York, HPD said to us, the private sites will produce the low income housing, and it has produced 2,600 units, 66% of which are for people below 60% and 50% of AMI. It's just opposite in our district because of how they chose to work the rezoning and the mitigation that happened throughout the district. So that's why it's somewhat different here. And it is not a rejection of a public site for low income. It's the opposite. We embrace private sites that have created incredible volume of low income housing and continues to produce, like a letter coming up next for 550 10th Avenue. So that happens all the time. I hope that clarifies it for you a bit.
Well, it pretty much does, but I think we also need to sort of you see, a lot of commitments were made previously, and the circumstances have changed. We need to take that into account. And make,
right, but the circumstances have not changed on the homeless
finish.
population.
Let me
That's
finish.
what you have to understand.
Let me finish.
That's not accurate. It's the same population, the same numbers.
I understand. What I'm saying is that your point, I mean, the point that board is making that HPD should sit down with the community board and discuss this thoroughly. Absolutely well I mean, I accept that. I accept that promise. What I'm saying is that why don't we ask for that conversation to start now rather than throw this whole thing out of the window?
We have asked the conversation to start since 2009. And the city represented at our meeting on Thursday, they are very willing to talk to us. So we have to see where it goes, but we have to start from a point of, you haven't even talked to us, you just moved ahead and come up with a replacement project.
But my larger point is only one single point, and you understand that better than anybody else does. When it comes to affordable housing for the lower income groups, it's always in other boroughs. It's always—
That's not correct. It's not, no, we have the highest production of low-income affordable housing in Community District 4. We have an extremely high per capita production because of the zoning that has happened here. It's not accurate what you say in our district. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm going to move on here. Christine?
Yes, what a sad story. I have 3 points, hopefully friendly. One is to move your section, which is called conclusion. I would move it up to the beginning because it does explain fairly well what the problems are. And in particular, the last paragraph, which says, you know, this is the first public discussion and we want to have the beginning of a process to reestablish trust, etc. I would suggest that this paragraph goes way up there and say, okay, everything is wrong, but we're going to talk, right? And maybe add the word balance somewhere in that sentence so that we have that. The last suggestion I would make is that we seem to be very focused on the points of agreement. And I would suggest that many more things have gone wrong. You know, we have not the Western point of agreement are not in agreement, are not good. It doesn't follow our affordable plan, housing plan, which has a lot of good stuff. The HPD owned RFP process doesn't seem to have been followed because usually they have a spec and then what we have is a different thing, right? And then finally, city planning's typical process is not working because they have not come to us with a rezoning. So I think maybe it's valuable to cast the discussion early on with a lot of things have gone wrong here. Lots of them on every level. And you know, I would even say clearly something has gone very wrong, you know, and then you can put the sentence saying we are ready to discuss and have a balance. So we get out of this just the agreements. It's a lot of things which are wrong here. So that would be—
I like the word balance and you make good points and I certainly think we should look at it.
Okay.
Thank you, Christine.
Marty?
Thank you very much. When I realized that the city was stonewalling and not speaking about this issue, I got really, the expression is pissed off. It angers me that all the hard work that our community board has done is ignored by powers that be, and coming at the last minute is absolutely not a good idea. That said, I also don't think that we can get stuck in our own good history of trying to get higher income affordable housing bans. And I'm afraid that that's what we have done. Several of the speakers before me have said that times have changed, and we actually need the low income band affordable housing because I'm not sure what the data is, and I got pretty confused in your, I don't know if this page with
The data's from DHS, Marty.
yeah, I know the data is from DHS. I have data from Coalition for the Homeless that looks different than the data that you presented.
This is data from DHS about shelters.
And this is data from Coalition for the Homeless for Shelter over the same period, and it looks very different than the data that you presented.
I think we can only speak to the city agencies that engage with us, right?
Joe, data is important here. And if there's a contradictory set of data, we need to take that pretty seriously. This contradictory set of data says that the homeless crisis has increased over time. And no matter whether it has increased over time or not, the homeless crisis is still quite severe. Excuse me, is still quite severe. The letter on page 5 doesn't support your articulated statements that we are supporting affordable housing for low income and homeless people. The headline is we have a homeless crisis. Crisis is much worse today. And the immediate next word that comes is false. And I have to read very carefully to understand that what you're meaning is that the homeless crisis is much worse today, and not that there's not a homeless crisis. But unfortunately, I'm just using this as an example of the overall flavor of the letter. It makes our board seem like it is opposed to doing housing for the homeless and low-income people. And so as the overall thing is constructed, I have a real problem with this letter and the way it's written. And if you're going to replace it with a letter, it might be a one-page letter that says you blindsided us and we need to have more conversations. I have always appreciated in my entire time on this board, Joe and others who do such a wonderful job of sharing with us the history. It's important for my understanding of my community and our understanding of our community. But I think we're stuck in that history right now, and times have changed and COVID has hit, and there is a serious need for the housing for the homeless. I have a problem with this letter. I'm sorry.
Katie?
Thanks. Couple quick things. So really minor, but starting at the beginning, in line 30, the language is that the letter asks us to firmly recommend rejection, which is just odd wording. So can we just have it be to firmly reject? So anyway, that's just line 30. And then much more so, very similar to what Marty was just saying. I think we're sort of making our argument more difficult for some of us to accept than we need to. I think it's such a strong argument that they have violated our agreement and that there's such an important need for moderate and affordable housing. But I think we can make that argument without being so aggressively antagonistic about homeless. So to be honest with you, I don't think that the whole paragraph between 217 and 226, you know, the one he was just referencing about the homelessness crisis, I just don't think you need that for your argument. We don't need to fight about whether or not the homeless situation is worse right now. It's a huge challenge for our city. All we really need to point out is there's also a tremendous need for moderate and middle income housing. So I would really be much more comfortable taking out that language and some related language, but just making this about the importance of moderate and middle income housing and the fact that they broke the agreement and we really need to focus on this.
I think you raise a good point, Katie, and I think that's a good point. We can look at that language. Very good point.
Great. And then just the very next paragraph, it's a little confusing. The one that says times have changed, we no longer have the past administration's priorities, our focus is on low-income housing, the greatest need. And then you say plain hypocritical, and then you go on to talk about the need for moderate and middle income. But the quote is about low income, and one could certainly argue that below 60% AMI is low income housing. So again, I think that there's some wording there that needs to change, or maybe, I don't know how helpful that paragraph is, but.
So I have a question for you, Katie, but others too. One of the problems here that we're trying to address, and maybe we can figure out a way to do it better, is that they have, HPD has changed their rationale multiple times. And it seems to be as if they're seeking to do something that will be very hard to respond against. So they've thrown the homeless crisis up against the wall, saying that's more important than anything else. Commitments don't matter. Or they've thrown the fact that we don't do this for moderate and middle income, yet in fact they do. So can you give us some suggestions on how we express that? Because they seem to be fishing, and we need to call them out on the fishing without undercutting our arguments. I understand that.
Yeah, and I mean, I really think it goes back to what you and some others said earlier, like our nurses and our fire department personnel and our police officers, they all need housing. And there are, many of them are above 60%, you know, our teachers. I think that this is more about our civil servants and the importance, and that so many of, you know, we can't be a, whatever, I'm sure all of you have much better language than I do. We can't be a good, effective community if we don't have our civil servants and they're above 60%, and many of them are feeling like they can't live nearby their jobs. And we really need to think about them. And frankly, we need to keep our commitments to them that we've negotiated in the past. You know, so I think if it's much more about that than about looking like we're piling on about the homeless, I just think it'll be more effective.
I think that's
Thanks.
great, Katie. We certainly can massage and work on that.
Yeah.
Good. Very good.
Thank you, Katie. Dolores.
Katie hit on a lot of points that actually came up at committee. Person after person talked about the fact that we are looking for the balance within our community. And if, you know, to speak to Marty about history, the reason why history is so important is when we were discussing the citywide plan for mandatory inclusionary, we fought very hard for the workforce development income bands. And the reason why is because that's missing to create that balance, especially up here in the northern part of the district, where we have so much of the supportive and the low income. So I think that if we are focused, as Katie was saying, on, and also Leslie articulated it very well at the committee meeting as a member of West 55th Street, which is right on this block, is that we're losing our families. We're losing that workforce development because they can't afford to live in the neighborhood any longer. And I think that's really key. This is not a fight against supporting homeless or supportive at all. This is about not just that the city has gone back on this, it's that the administration is telling this community that it knows better what this community needs. And we represent the specific community. We do not represent the city at large. The homeless issues and the other issues are very daunting and very complex. We will not solve it, but we can be part of the solution when we listen to our constituents and the people we represent to understand how to bring the balance back to our community instead of trying at the very high level to solve problems that are citywide and not specific to the community.
Thank you, Dolores. Sabrina.
Hi, well, it's just full disclosure, I am present and eligible for this, but I do have an opinion. I also have issues, some of the things that Katie and Morton and Baron expressed. I think this letter is very divisive, sort of like kind of like we have a problem with supportive housing, although we have supported in the past, but we feel that is not appropriate at this time. And also I will suggest that we're still open it, just the suggestion that it was brought up later, that for other spaces in the future for supportive housing. I do think that the argument needs to be made on the good part of why we're supporting, not only because there's history, there's a point of agreement, but also because the need of this income level bracket in our community for our public service and for folks who have that salaries. But again, it's really it's not the message as a New Yorkers and progressive that we are, and that we have these values of how are we going to face some of the problems that, yes, isn't just in our little tiny of our district, but it's really overall in our country, homelessness. And it doesn't feel correct with this letter. I think the language needs to be changed. So I just want to echo that. Again, I'm present and eligible. I work for Housing Works, so I would not be voting for this item. Thank you.
Maria.
Hi, thanks. JD or Joe, so I have a question just out of my own curiosity. And I'm asking this because 16 years ago when I worked for the city, I looked at the starting salary currently, and it's about 50K. And that, I know that's about 60% AMI. So I'm just curious, this site, would that have, and I believe so, but I just wanted to clarify, 60% of AMI, was that like in the original agreement, or is that something that's being discussed now?
The original agreement says 165 or under, but it was one of the middle income sites that was brought by HBD to us in the ULURP.
Yeah, I saw that in the letter, 165 and below. So
right.
I guess it would include 60% AMI. The other thing is,
Maria, I just want to note for you that 60% of AMI is 64,000 today for a family of 3, not for a single. So it's lower for a single. And
yeah. I'm looking at so 60% AMI for one is 50,160, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was about what I was making 15 years ago. So
right, it is much higher. It is much higher today for those salaries.
And what was I going to? The other thing I was just going to say, I guess, along with like 2 other board members, I live really close to the site. So the site's on 54th and 9th. I'm on 55th and 9th. And I just want to share my opinion is that personally, I'm clear as a city that we need more supportive housing for individuals, and I would say especially for families. But my personal gripe here is the fact that it sounds like there was already a community, a lot of work that was already done and put into creating an RFP, and that the city or HPD, I don't know where everything would fall, but has come along and said, here, you're going to have this instead. And not considering what it feels like, not considering what the people who live in the community have decided they want in their community, and people who come into the administration, which changes every 2 to 4 or 5 years, comes in and says, this is what we want instead. So I think that for me, that's my personal gripe. And I did see in the letter, I didn't read everything. It was 8 pages, but I did read some of it, especially the conclusion. And I think it does mention, and what I would hope is that CB4 does is what we always do, which is collaborate and compromise. Yeah, that's personally how I'm feeling about it.
I want to add one comment on that, Maria. Of the supportive units in this building, you said you want to see more supportive units for families. The majority of the supportive units in this building as proposed are studios. So
Yeah,
they're,
that's
specific another issue.
Yeah, we had asked specifically in any discussion that any supportive housing be for families, because we don't have that in our district. We have it for singles, not for families.
All right, Viren, I'm going to skip over you because I'm going to let everyone get one shot before I go for seconds. So
and
Dale,
the only thing,
go ahead, Maria.
The only thing I want to add, I think in helping, when you help a family, you're helping for generations, right? It's not just one individual. I think it's really, really important. And I feel like we as a community need to think more about, this is just on my pedestal or whatever, just think more about really helping families. It's really, really important. You're helping generations when you do.
All right, thanks, Maria. Dale.
Thanks for the letter. Yeah, it was a very interesting and passionate meeting. Thanks, JD, for guiding it, and Joe for taking us through this history. I think I also agree that Leslie at the meeting made the most affirmative case for middle income housing. And I think that should be the focus of this letter. I think the betrayal narrative is not helpful. Just itemize where they're at, and where we're at, and let's work towards getting closer to each other. And I also think like the discussion of homelessness in the meeting itself, at least in the chat forum, a lot of the members of the public who were there, a lot of the neighbors who were there, immediately started demonizing people experiencing homelessness, complaining about what's going on the streets. And that was what they brought to the meeting. So they're hiding in a way behind, I think there is a NIMBY element hiding behind the betrayal narrative, like the city did us wrong, when they really are, there is really a NIMBY element of objection to this project. So I would not fuel that at all. And I think actually JD did an admirable job of not letting that lead the discussion in the meeting. I don't want it to lead the discussion of this letter either.
Dale, you raise a very good point that Leslie's weaving of how the community can work for everybody. So that's an excellent point. We can work on that.
The critical part is the affirmative case for middle income housing. We absolutely require it as much as we require any other band of housing, any other group. To be an integral and robust community, we need middle income housing.
And we shouldn't be buying into the divide that it's either or. It can be both.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is, again, why I'm sort of saying like downplay in this letter. I'm doing it strategically too. The betrayal narrative and the homeless supportive housing versus middle income. Just make the affirmative case for middle income housing and say, clinically, this is where you are, this is where we are. We want to get you to here, and that's because of the history and the process and the need.
Good point, Dale.
Mike Noble.
Yeah, there's not much left to say. Everyone has made a tremendous contribution to this letter, everyone. And I appreciate Joe and JD doing the heavy lifting as usual on these matters. But I want to make sure that Christine's comment where we pull that conclusion up forward and the word balance should apply, and we should highlight families and take out any head-to-head middle income families versus homeless. Let's try to get rid of that tension there. And I think we've got a great letter. That's it.
Thanks, Mike. Betty.
Hi, sorry, took a little while to unmute. Yeah, I think there are really great suggestions, which I'm not going to go over now. And I think the improvements that were suggested will really help the letter. I'm kind of stuck on the violation of the points of agreement. And maybe that shouldn't be emphasized in the letter, but having gone through and seen a variety of points of agreement and how important they are in guiding future decisions, that I feel it is an incredible betrayal, and it really sticks a knife into trusting the city and the decision makers in the city, that if you've negotiated points of agreement, that they can just be thrown out the window. I'm not saying how much of that should be in the letter, but I just personally am very upset that the city could do that. That's it.
Thanks, Betty. You echo what a lot of people up here are feeling.
Yeah, I think there's, and I'm not trying to be ageist in any way here. I think the people who have been on the board since the original points of agreement were negotiated feel a lot more strongly about the betrayal than newer members of the board. It's just a sense I'm getting. I apologize if I offend anyone with that statement, but it seems to me that if you were involved back in 2009 negotiating the points of agreement, this hurts a hell of a lot more. I'm going to go to Twee next, and then I'll start on the second round.
Okay, yeah, just small comments because I defer to everybody's comments here. In terms of Joe asking about how we make it stick, because it does seem they're going to try to make it in a way that it's impermeable, right? I was thinking if they might be just going with a political prevailing winds, like this is the hot topic of the day. But at the same time, I think Dale raises a good point where we don't want to play into, you know, the feeling of betrayal. And I get it, Lowell, I get it. It's not the first time this has happened with any sort of city administration. And it is a little bit of an affront, and I can feel it from everybody who's been on here longer. But it is a good point that Dale says to make it more clinical, and just try to focus on the goal of what it is that we want to do.
I just want to note something for the broader board. We should remember that a lot of this is cynical actions. It is the city using whatever it wants to use at the moment to get what it wants to get done. This mayor has been running after numbers on affordable housing and numbers on homeless housing. So guys, don't for a moment think there's some grand plan that's supported here. This is solely about the latest press release. So therefore, the flavor will change in January, things will change again. And one of the things we have to balance here in a letter, and by the way, I really appreciate the comments. They're so thoughtful, like about how do we figure out to rephrase this and get it across. We should not be afraid to also say how angry we are, because that's what gets a reaction from every administration I've dealt with back to Koch. You must say how angry you are. If you are just clinical and dispassionate, they roll over you. But the issue is that everyone's raised is how to balance it. And this is really good response to help get this thing to be better.
I just want to say one thing to Lowell's comment. There was a lot of discussion with the larger community, not just people on the board, and they have long memories. And it was a pretty tough discussion. I still will not talk to Joe Restuccia because we had so many fights about this thing. But it's the larger community that I think drives this discussion. And I agree with Joe. There's been great comments.
Right. Tina hasn't said anything yet on this topic.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, I love this discussion. I think it's really amazing, everyone's honesty and so forth. I do agree with Lowell pointing out that those who are elders and the in CB4, there's a point to looking at history and also educating younger agency staff who may not have the same understanding that we might take for granted. So I think there is certain value in pointing out that there has been a bit of a bait and switch, if you will. So I agree with Joe in terms of, and I've looked at this myself and experienced it myself with other sort of housing coalitions that I'm a part of. There is a bit of city cynicism that involves housing overall, especially under this, the 7+ years of this administration. And I think we have to be mindful of that. So I just wanted to make those comments.
All right. Viren and Roberta, you've both spoken already, so please keep your comments short. Viren first.
Yeah, just very quickly, I'm just going to sort of echo Marty's comments. And I think if it is about history, it's about betrayal, it's about process, I think that should be the focus of the first page. And I think that's what we should be asking for, much more than everything else that follows. So I would definitely kind of welcome reduced version of this letter, a single page letter, which basically is emphasizing how that betrayal is hurting us as a community and how that is the most important thing that needs to be addressed right away. And until that is done, this project is not even to be discussed. That's my 2 pennies.
Okay. Leslie's a new speaker on the topic.
Sorry, sorry. Thank you, Dale and JD, actually, for those kind words. I'm just going to reiterate because Viren just brought it up and Marty was talking about it. It's not just the betrayal. I wasn't on the board when this first happened. I think this administration has devalued working class and middle class families throughout the whole administration. And I don't know why we're afraid to say that. And I don't know why, if we do say that somehow we're against low and low income, because that's just not the case, because it's not competing interests. In this specific case, it is right now, because the city has put us in that spot, but it's not. And what Dale was saying about what I talked about at the meeting is that I'm on my building's board, right? So I'm intimately aware of the building's finances, and of course, each person's finances, for better or worse. And we are losing our families, people with 2 or 3 kids left and right. And it's hurting our schools, it's hurting our neighborhood. And I'm not going to get on a soapbox about, urban economics and how we need balance, but we do. So Viren, to your point and to Marty's point, I totally understand. But when I see friends of mine who say to me, my daughter's best friend, she's 8, they had to leave. They couldn't, they're like, we can't afford anything more than a 1-bedroom here, and I can't raise 3 kids anymore. There's just no units available. And so I think, especially in our neighborhood where I'm seeing this up close, we need that balance. And so this isn't against homeless or against low income. It's for something. It's for keeping and providing for middle class units. And another thing that you guys were saying about the AMIs, you're talking more if you're 1 person, but families are 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 people. Okay, so that changes those numbers dramatically. Anyway, that's what I have to say. And like I said, it's not against anything. It's for keeping some of our families intact, because if you look at the school system, you can see the trends of how people are leaving.
And one of the points that was made at the meeting by me, I must say, was, they were talking, the guy from HPD was talking about a housing crisis. And I made the point to him, you can define this crisis many ways. You can define it as a homeless crisis, but you can also define it as a housing crisis of the type Leslie was just talking about, where there's no housing for people who want to raise a family in this district. And that's a crisis as well. Roberta, back to you. Please keep it short.
Absolutely. I wanted to raise my hand because we brought up this sort of middle income developments that HPD currently is marketing via Housing Connect. And for context, I work in affordable housing. I work for HPD. I have nothing to do with this particular development or development at all. But I did want to at least provide some context. It does appear that the agency is moving away from those deals, and that these deals were performed several years ago and are simply coming online at this time. And that the agency may not find that case, that these units are available at this time to be particularly persuasive. I think part of the reason that the agency has moved away from these more middle income units and subsidizing those units is because the wait list or the interest in those units is simply significantly lower than it is for low income units. And that the interest in low income units is so overwhelming because the proximity of rents for the market-based alternatives are just not really there. And I say this as a middle-income civil servant who lives here. And so I don't know how persuasive that will be. I'm not saying it can't be brought up, but I think it may wind up being dismissed because it's definitely a conversation that I've heard before. I think it might be worth thinking about in the future statements of district needs. How do you create middle-income housing in a way that maybe doesn't require HPD subsidy? And there may be a lot of different ways to do this. But I'm thinking what initially comes to mind is thinking about strategically rezoning parts of the district to think about how best to do that. I am not saying that is the only solution, but there may be ways to do this, outside of the current inclusionary housing proposals that are available. Not a part of the resolution, but worth noting.
Yeah, Roberta, I don't want to turn this into a debate on housing policy.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you're talking about buildings that are just coming online now that were agreed to a long time ago. As I think we've made abundantly clear, this was agreed to an awful long time ago. Katie, last comment from the board, and then I'm going to go back to JD with a question.
So I think it would be great. I think we can be angry, but I think the thing we have to be angry about is that we are angry at the city's betrayal of our moderate and middle income families. That promises were made years ago and we need them to stick with it, right? And just really have the focus be on that and not have it, we just don't have to say anything about homeless, or we just don't have to get caught up in that. And when the city's behaving badly, it doesn't mean that we should be lowering ourselves and throwing in other arguments that are going to distract. I really think we should take out the homeless references and just show our anger at having our middle and moderate income people betrayed, and that the city has to keep its promises.
Understood, Katie. Excellent suggestion. Understood.
Right. So I'm going to come back to you, JD, because we have to vote on something tonight, and there have been a lot of comments that have been made about the letter. Do you have a sense of what this letter is going to look like that we can vote on?
Can I recap the comments? I took notes, JD. JD, I took notes.
Great.
Can I do the recap? So we're going to add a reference about the cherry picking that Paul brought up. We're going to note that the MTA space should be reduced to help this work better. We're going to delete the whole NIMBY reference. We're going to move the conclusion to the beginning and add balanced. We're going to put in language about continuing that we have supported and will continue to support sensitively cited supportive housing. We're going to note, as Christine, that it also doesn't follow the affordable housing plan of the board. They didn't come to us before rezoning, and something has gone very wrong, kind of in that flat language. That issue about firmly reject, we're going to fix that. The section about the homeless issues, I think everyone has spoken about that a lot. We're going to take that out, I think, and just sort of refer to it as opposed to make it an either or. So we don't, I like what Katie said, let's not step to their level. That's a great thing, right? And then we're going to go back and put something in Dolores's language and Leslie's discussion about really pump up the civil servants and the idea that it's two-income household, and that's the group that does not get any opportunity, right? And that was those were the comments that I got, that there should be major changes. That's
one other, Joe, Maria's and Leslie's idea about families.
Oh, yes.
Also.
Oh, families, right, got it.
All right, I'm calling a stop to this now. I think we have an idea, we have an outline of a letter now, enough that we can vote on it. If people have, the letter will be circulated. Can we circulate this one more time just for comments?
Please, yes, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So if you have,
well, wait.
Mr. Chair.
Just to be clear, though,
we're going to vote tonight, Jesse, but we have to circulate to show that everything's been properly incorporated. That's
right. That's all I'm asking for, not for comments or changes, just so everyone can see where this ended up.
So we want this circulated
tonight on the outlines of a letter that Joe and JD just outlined.
So we're circulating this to the full board just for clarity's sake.
For clarity's sake, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't think I would get to the point of being willing to make a motion, and I know we don't do motions because it's Zoom and we take it at the end. But I think based on the feedback, I hope many of my other colleagues on the board who were in a different place before this started are in a different place now based on the conversation we had this evening. So I want to thank everybody for that, and the chairs as well.
All right. Well, all right. I'm going to move on here because we've got to keep moving, or we're going to be here all night.
One clarification.
Yes, JD.
I'm sorry. We will be circulating the altered letter. That's what you mean.
Yes, just so everyone can see where it ended up. This is not for comments or questions unless somebody finds an egregious typo. It's just so everyone can see where it ended up. I think that's fair given the amount of changes in the tenor of the discussion.
Okay,
So if we agree with the overall letter, we vote on the vote sheet, we vote yes on this letter?
Yes.
All right, just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Because Paul, I'm coming to you now because I'm going to Chelsea Land Use. And you've got the 157 West 24 letter.
Yeah, we have the letter on 157 West 24th Street. The public hearing, I described what the situation is there. The letter is item 18. You've all read it. Anybody have any questions?
David.
Yeah, I have a concern about line 32 and 33 on the second page. There's a sentence that says a glass-faced residential building rising to more than twice the height of neighboring buildings is not in character with the block. I would suggest striking that. It suggests that we would find the building acceptable if it weren't glass-faced or weren't residential, and you know, the material of the building is not a zoning issue or a concern of BSA. Can we strike that?
Well, actually, we aren't necessarily opposed to a residential building on that block. We are opposed to the lack of contextual architectural design that fits into the block. That was part of the discussion on the committee, was that if it was designed differently and fit more in the context of the block, it would be fine. And we're also not opposed to a certain amount of residential on that block, because that block already has 11 residential buildings. So I'm not sure we can strike that language because that does reflect committee commentary.
I don't recall discussion of the building's material, and the board has in fact in the past supported the construction of a new glass and steel building even within the West Chelsea Historic District.
I'm not comfortable striking the whole thing, but we can find some more acceptable language, David. If you want to, you and I can work on that offline to change it slightly. But the point of that statement is that it rises to more than twice the height of the neighboring buildings, and that is what's not in character with the block. And that's
right.
That's part of the argument about neighborhood character.
It's what I want to keep the focus on. I don't want it to imply that if it were a brick building, we'd find it acceptable.
Not a 155-story building, correct, but a brick building we would probably find acceptable.
I don't agree that that's what we talked about at that height.
Oh, correct, at that height, not that height. That's the main thrust, is not that height.
But also, I feel that it undermines us to be weighing in on something as a matter of aesthetic preference, and material is not a zoning issue. I see Viren nodding, and perhaps we could move on to Viren.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think I agree with David. We didn't talk about materiality because it wasn't presented to us. We don't know what materials they're planning to use. Building elevations, facade treatment, none of that was actually discussed. Main concern, whether the building height and the sort of proportions of the building were contextually compatible with the neighborhood character. I think we should keep that focus very clear.
So are you guys accept if I just take out the words glass face? So a residential building rising to more than twice the height of the neighborhood building is not in character with the block.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, I'll take
I mean, that's fine with me, but we would oppose, a non-residential building. It's implicit that it's a residential building because that's the variance request.
Right.
But if you eliminate the part about glass, I'll be satisfied.
Thank you.
Okay.
Will do.
All right, anything else on this one? Transportation planning, Christine and Dale.
Okay, hi everyone. Transpo has 4 letters this month. We've been slacking. The first one is revocable. Oh, yeah, the first one is revocable consent for bollards, anti-terrorist security bollards at the Spiral building on 34th and 10th. A bus stop application, 11th Avenue safety concerns on the design of 11th Avenue, and a letter in support of Disability Pride NYC, and a request for the DOT to consider hiring persons with disabilities to undertake the surveying of the ramps at curb cuts at the corners. Those are our 4 letters. Are there any questions about these letters or comments?
Betty.
I just would like to know about bollards, and is there any way that they don't have to look really ugly? And could the committee or the letter do, I know you suggested planters, but maybe there could be a more elaborate suggestion because generally they look horrible. That's it.
Right. This is the nature of this building requires a certain resistance to impact, and the most kind of the most obvious solution is a fixed bollard. In this case, the developer is using like a stainless steel clad bollard and retractable bollards at the freight entrance, at the loading entrances. We asked them, they said that it was very difficult given the strict requirements that they were seeking to meet, that they had to meet. I think this was passed by City Council in 2017 by that a building of this type needs to have security bollards all around it. That, you know, kind of hiding them in planters or articulating them otherwise is challenging for them to meet the specific, I don't remember how many pounds of impact they had to meet. So I feel like they represented that they looked at all of the options for having fewer bollards. We were somewhat satisfied with that, although we did ask them, and we do ask them in the letter, to take a second look and see if they can reduce the number of bollards or effectively camouflage or conceal some of them in certain instances. But I don't think they're especially in love with the idea of having these bollards dotting the sidewalk around their entire structure. They're just meeting a technical requirement. If anybody else has any other, and I know Viren spoke, you know, passionately about like trying to get them to be less bollard-like, but according to the developer, this is part of their requirements to build a building of that type in this location.
Okay. Maybe Viren can design something for them.
No, I just want to quickly add here, I don't know if this is a zoning requirement. So if that is what they presented, that would be incorrect.
No, it's an NYPD requirement.
NYPD.
I didn't say zoning and they didn't say zoning.
Right. NYPD would want to put bollards everywhere.
Everywhere.
If you allow them to do that. So this is a larger issue. And I think as a board, I'm speaking out of turn, so I'll wait my turn. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Viren, finish it. Finish the thought.
The quick point is, Lowell, is that in our community, if we allow this kind of bollards, it kind of privileges certain buildings over other buildings, number one. Number two, it privileges high-end condominium buildings over pedestrians. And I think that is a problem. We are basically compromising our right-of-way and sidewalk space, which is practically reserved for the pedestrians. It's already being encroached upon in a variety of different ways. 238, I can't remember the number right now, but that's one too many on one location. So I have a fundamental problem here that we are basically losing, 18 inches this way plus the bollard itself, more than 3 feet of public sidewalk, just to satisfy a requirement that is, in my opinion, totally made up. Because as an architect, I understand when I actually design a building, and if I actually provide bollards and security and safety measures, the developer is going to be very happy because it becomes a selling point as well. So we as a community need to actually decide, is this what we want to actually entertain? And from design point of view, there are a variety of different ways in which the issue of security and safety can be addressed. Bioswales, planters, and the sort of streetscape features which are very easily available, which are readily available for architects to sort of.
Viren, may I make a suggestion? I think the land use committee, both of the land use committee, should take up that issue because there are solutions for building the defenses inside the building, at the base of the building. And I think the land use committee should invite people which are knowledgeable to discuss how to make it work, and send a letter to GCP saying, okay, well, can you change the zoning and make it this way so that we don't lose all that space?
Right, but this is not zoning, right? So writing to DCP is not going to help us. This is not a zoning requirement.
No, but I'm saying what we could make it a requirement saying when you need safety, this is the way you do it.
Exactly.
Just like when you need to protect against water, and then this is the way you do it.
Exactly. And then Christine, you're making a good point. I'll tell you what. They would come and encroach upon the sidewalk space, but if you tell them that why don't you give away 3 feet beyond your property line to provide that protection for your building, they will not agree with that.
Right. So I think that's the way we can settle it if the respective land use committee can want to take it up.
Right. But in the meanwhile, are we going to approve this request?
Okay, so who's next? Mike Noble?
Yeah, Mike's next.
Okay.
Christian, I just asked, are we going to approve this of HS? Because I think if we are actually opening up this kind of requesting them to come back to us.
We have already approved the Hudson Yards, other places, the whole Time Warner meeting. I mean, there are a lot of them approved out there.
All right.
We are
all right. I want to cut this off because we're going in circles.
Yeah.
Vivian, if you don't like it, you've got your
Right.
vote to use it. But the committee is not. The committee chairs are not willing to change the letter.
And just to say, I wouldn't characterize this as strictly coming from NYPD, although obviously their feedback, but to my understanding, there's city council legislation that was passed in 2017 that requires security anti-terrorist bollards at structures of this nature.
All right, I want to keep going with the comments. Mike Noble.
Mine is just technical. Who are you addressing the letter 22 to?
22 is
going to DOT.
Is DOT with a CC to the mayor's office for people with disabilities and to Disability Pride, the nonprofit.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Marty.
I have a question about 21. It's a clarification question. In the text of the letter somewhere, you talk about Jersey barriers. I wasn't clear whether those Jersey barriers were in the middle of a two-way bike lane or whether they were on either side of it. You were talking about the safety on the bike lanes. It wasn't clear to me from the letter whether you thought two-lane bike lanes were.
Yeah, it's to protect on the outside. So we need to clean up the language.
We can clarify that point.
Appreciate that. Are you taking the position that two-way bike lanes are not safe? I hope that's
no. The point is that the two-way bike lane is in a very tense environment. So I think they need the protection. Any bike lane needs the protection.
And you're saying two-way is okay?
Yeah.
All right, Lynn, did you want to say something? You just put your hand out as I was about to call on you.
No, my points have already been made.
All right, thank you, Gwen. Katie.
Thanks. So it sounds to me like we're not certain if this is, to Viren's point, I guess, we're not certain if this is required by the HPD or if it's required by the law, the city council. I think it would be really useful to know. I understand that we've heard certain things, but I think it would be really helpful to confirm what is required by HPD, what is required by the city council, before we're agreeing to any recommendations. Because if we could make different recommendations, I think we would be tempted to. Obviously we want to comply with laws.
Katie, I'm sorry, Katie, when you refer to HPD, what are you referring to?
No, she means city planning.
Sorry, I'm just wondering about the the bollards. So this is, and whether or not as many bollards are required where we're being told that they are required. I think it would be helpful to know what the requirements are and who is the requiring authority.
I have the city council law up. It's from 2017. It was introduced by Councilman Rodriguez, and it requires installation of bollards on sidewalks to ensure pedestrian safety in the aftermath of a vehicle terror attack. So this is what they're addressing with this requirement. This is why there's like specific standards for like the impacts. Like it has to be like be able to stop a 50,000-pound truck at a certain speed, and that's what they're addressing. Honestly, the developers at the Spiral would not. I mean, to Viren's point, they're not invested in the bollards per se. They're meeting a requirement per the city council legislation.
Right, and I'm not going to let this go any further if it starts going into policy, because this is not the place to debate policy on this.
Thank you for sharing that, Dale. That was helpful.
All right, Viren, as long as it's not policy related.
It's not policy related, but this requirement is not something that the developer has to meet to be able to construct the building. So it's not a DOB requirement. It is not a DCP requirement. They can, without bollards, also can move ahead and complete the plans for construction.
That sounds like policy.
Well, according to the city law, they're required to have the bollards. It may not be DOB, but it came out of the council from what Dale was reading. All right, I'm going to move on here. Housing, Health, and Human Services, Joe and Maria, you've got one letter.
This is an inclusionary letter for 550 10th Avenue. That's the Covenant House site between 40th and West 41st Streets on the east side of the avenue. And we already dealt with the Covenant House building itself, then building a new building. Remember, this whole deal is that Covenant House owned the land and the buildings and has sold part of it to Gotham to build a new residential building on that site. And as part of this whole arrangement, Gotham both relocated them temporarily within the site and built a new Covenant House headquarters on West 41st Street, which they will own with no debt as part of the whole financial arrangement. They will also have 2 floors in this residential tower for their Covenant House World headquarters, moving from West 34th Street between 7th and 8th to this location when it is done. What in front of us tonight is an inclusionary housing development. And for the members having gone through the prior discussion, I want to note this is the first time that the inclusionary housing provisions of Hudson Yards for moderate and middle income have been used in the Hudson Yards district. They have been used in the Clinton Special District before. So we are seeing units built for 70% of AMI and 125% of AMI. And that ranges for a family of 1 at 70% from 58,000 to 83,000, and a family of 2, a family of 1 and 125% of AMI from 104,000 to 149,000. And that does begin now to service the families with 2 incomes like the municipal workers who make in this range. As usual, the developer comes to the community board, presents something, shows us plans, shows us how everything is laid out, and then gives us a schedule of finishes. We are always back and forth to make sure the finishes between the affordable units and the market rate units are the same. And in fact, they were not in this original proposal. The difference was that there would be engineered wood on the floors in the market rate units, but there would be, they called it luxury vinyl in the affordable units, and that the bathroom tiles would be different and the kitchen tiles would be different. Since our discussion, they have come back and they have said all the units will have the same finishes throughout, both market rate and affordable. The one difference is that in the affordable apartments, they will have stainless steel appliances. But the new fashion for market rate apartments is to do something called panels on top of appliances so they disappear. We were very specific that the appliances would be the exact same grade, merely the market rate would have these panels so you don't even see a kitchen to exist. The Second item was amenities. And the amenities were listed in the letter about what would be open and free versus things that would have a fee. They came back to us with a letter, which is attached, that says for the tenants at 70% of AMI, they would reduce the amenity fee, which they project to be about $1,000 a year for those units, including the gym, to be reduced by 50% for units at 125% of AMI, to reduce that fee by 25%. And that is a total. We approved the inclusionary housing plan with these changes, incorporated the letter from the developer. And then there's one issue that Maria is going to talk about that we discovered after this letter was written. Maria?
The fact that so 113 of the 137 units are actually permanently affordable. And I'm assuming everyone was under the impression all of them were permanently affordable.
So there was a lot of confusion in the presentation. It was not our normal presentation we get with a lot of the details very clearly laid out. And we asked these questions, and I believe, just for the committee members who are there, give me a nod of your head. I believe we left with the idea that every single unit was permanently affordable. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
we did. We did.
Okay. So
it wasn't even asked, I remembered.
Right, it wasn't even asked because it was sort of like it was part of the discussion, right? So I would suggest that number one, we moved to adopt this letter as written, but we're going to go back to Gotham and request them to make the 24 units, which are the affordable New York units, permanently affordable. I believe this is achievable for the following reason. When Gotham came to us with 515 West 42nd Street, the travel insight that was not built because the owner changed their mind and did not sell, they did agree in writing to make the 24 units permanently affordable. So I want to make our approval contingent upon that change, because I think it's part of their presentation, but our misunderstanding that we just assumed everything was fully affordable. I don't think it was concealment or anything like that. Sabrina?
And Jeffrey first.
Oh, sorry.
2 points here, Joe. We took action, the woman that spoke in the public session, we took action on the Gotham rent changes, right? I'm recalling a letter and discussion about that, right?
We brought it up in general, Jeffrey, but Katie has been working on a full research of all of the issues and documents, and she just presented that actually tonight to go to the Housing Committee in October. So we're going to take that up in full.
I think that it's important that we get on the record about that, given it came up in public session, and then here's this developer that claims good and seemingly does good, but then tried to do something pretty shady.
But part of it I want to say honestly is from our board end. Katie's been working on this for a couple of months. It's been very complicated to go through the documents to figure it out. So it's not like our lack of action, we just haven't gotten to it. Am I right, Katie?
But I have another question also, Joe, after Jessica.
I'll just for further clarity on Joe's point. I mean, there was a lot of work on this, right? We had meetings we had briefings with Gotham. You guys held a public hearing. HCC was there. Gotham came and presented. We demanded a number of documents. It took them a while to get to us. There was certainly a slow response from Gotham, but we got those documents. Katie's been working on reviewing them, and the small group.
And they were complicated documents to review, Katie, right?
So I just, for clarity's sake, there has been public, while there hasn't been an official, I think, letter. I have to remind myself of official letter. There was a public hearing on this. There was a lot of talk. We've done a lot of work on it.
Thanks, Jesse. And then, first of all, kudos on the apartment mix size. I appreciate the breakdown. I think we can't always just have majority 2 and 3 bedroom apartments or have that be our fighting line. So I think this is a really healthy mix. And then second, the trash. Like, is there an interior pickup plan or just space inside the building to compact and make trash smaller, but it will still create piles of detritus on the street, like every other building in the city? Because we have to stop allowing the city to get away with this from a development standpoint if we're going to keep making change here.
So the committee pretty much grilled them on this.
Because
one of the issues,
who agreed to it on 41st? Silverstein has an internal pickup coming online, right?
Right. The difference here is the Gotham portion is merely one portion of the larger site. And it's not that big a footprint in comparison to Covenant House. So we went back and forth to discuss how do they do this. And they said what they could do was actually make sure there's storage in the building so we don't have that very issue. We brought that up to them, how embarrassing this is to have these long rows of trash on the street. So that's a difficult circumstance here because it really is.
To be clear, there will be long rows of trash on the street.
I think there will be because we have a very small footprint of a building.
So we have a problem, right? We heard about rodents earlier this evening. They're chronic on my block. They're chronic all over the place. And a huge part of that is because we pile up thousands of trash bags and we have a brand new building being built. And yet we can't come up with a solution when we're starting from scratch here. So why would we allow a problem that pollutes and makes our city so hideous as if there's not more problems to deal with, but to allow something to remain the way it's been for over 100 years? Why in 2021 are we even contemplating approval of this when there's actually a solution?
Because in front of us is not approval of a trash management plan, but an inclusionary housing plan. And you and Christine and everybody else have been excellent in trying to figure out ways that this can get enshrined properly in the city codes.
All right, so this is an as of right development seeking our approval for their inclusionary housing plan. Is there, and I should know this from the letter, but is there a retail footprint in the building?
Very small. Yeah, it's just part of the furniture on 10th Avenue because the building has a Covenant House, their headquarters there too.
I mean, this is an embarrassment. It's really unfortunate with this excellent mix of affordability and a potentially decent developer to then screw the rest of the community by literally throwing trash on us.
So can I put this over to either committee dealing with transportation? I think this is something we keep bringing up in the large projects. And we've done this now also in the review of the inclusionary housing and the rezoning on West 43rd Street between 8th and 9th. And a lot of it is there's no requirements put as part of the general housing maintenance code or the Department of Buildings, code say how you manage trash in large buildings. What committee does this belong in Lowell? Because I think it's the same kind of thing like the bollards should go to some committee.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd be open to any committee that wants to take this on, whether it's transportation.
I think it'd be a conversation.
We had a discussion last year where I thought, there was my impression was that city planning or Department of Building would have to change their rules. And therefore, you started to have a very good report last year. And now from there, I think those committees should really design some proposed rules and we should send them to DOB.
But Christina, I'll take your advice as a former chair. Does this go to land use or does this go to housing?
Well, I think it needs to be a little bit of land use because it's about the building design.
Where does the requirements for bike rooms?
It's like mechanicals is how it should be.
Yeah, the requirement for bike rooms is
bike rooms is analogous,
right? So anything which is inside the building would be by the people who are the most knowledgeable about that stuff, which is typically land use, right?
It would be land use, yeah.
Jesse wants to weigh in here.
I want to weigh in. Hello?
Jesse first.
I'll defer to JD.
So we have discussed this at land use. We have come up with proposals with one of our members. It was really great. We've had a lot of meetings. Again, it's going to be difficult to get this through. I was just wondering in the meantime, and I think this came up at one of our meetings, is when they put the garbage out, even if it's kept inside.
Right.
I think that's something we could immediately do to say that the garbage must be put out 5 minutes before the trucks arrive, the pickup, because they probably, that might be something we can use until we get everything internal in the buildings.
Because, just to say in general, Jeffrey, it's got to be something about the square footage of a building having X requirements or Y requirements above a certain size, you have more, and then a certain number of unit of apartments. So if maybe Christine's right, if we as a board can recommend something and start pushing it, it's like everything else we do. No one wants to hear about it, but eventually it gets adopted going through, you know?
And then we did, I mean, transportation, we did a testimony on garbage because there was a pilot, and I'll send it to you, which had the beginning of some guidelines.
So what I was going to bring up was that, right? So
we do a joint task force between the two committees.
Mm-hmm. So last year we had a planning fellow work on this project out of Clinton Hell's Kitchen land use. She produced a very significant, I think, set of best practices and ideas and policies. There was a phase 2 to that needs to get done. And so I think when we have the ability, either through the fund for the city of New York to have a planning fellow, we just got one for Chelsea. We can next cycle, we can get one again for Clinton Hell's Kitchen again, if we want to do the phase 2 of that, where we really do then collect all of the stuff that Christine's done out of Christine and Dale have done out of transportation, what's come out of the land use, the new rules, and put together, like Joe is saying, a policy that then we can just deliver to folks.
Every developer that comes
along. But I will go back to what Joe's saying, and this is also true with all of our issues with the demo sites, the illegal demo sites. Is each site is so unique, right? And you were just not going to get the same, we're going to have to be flexible and understanding what we can get out of this issue with each site, and so we can't just say, oh, you have to have this, or you can't, or we're not going to approve something. I think that puts you guys in a very difficult position. And so I think you have to have sort of different, different stages, phases, whatever you want to call it. JD's point is, I think, is a good one about the timing of the operations. That's something that's very controllable. And so, but I think bigger projects, you can have bigger solutions. And so that's all I'll say.
Right. All right, I'm going to move on here. Sabrina.
I know you mentioned before, but you said that there's going to be an investigation based on what the Patricia, I think was her name, the lady who spoke on the hearing.
No, not an investigation. What happened is they came and spoke about all these issues. We asked for all these documents to determine if they were in compliance with them. And that's what we got. It took a long time to get. We got it. And now at our next housing committee meeting, Katie's going to present a letter and the findings of her, not investigation, but her, checking out, understanding what's going on.
Okay.
Josephine.
Hi. So will this letter be contingent on the findings? It's hard to vote on something and we don't know whether, what's really happening with these rents. Thank you.
I have to say, honestly, that in front of us is not the record of this developer. It's this particular application. And we have to remember, we always connect dots, but there is no finding. There is no investigation. None of that there are complaints about rent charges at certain rent levels in various Gotham buildings. And everything has been pretty much put on hold. Maria, can you speak to this as you're in a Gotham building? Maria?
Yeah, that's why I put my hand up, actually. I was going to mention after everyone else did that. So I live in a Gotham building. I'm one of the tenants in the subsidized units. Currently there's litigation occurring and a settlement being worked on. That's where we are with it.
Right. So there's HCC is very involved. There's attorneys. They're trying to figure something out. So
yeah, HCC is involved as well as pro bono law firm.
I understand that, but I guess we're voting on specifically, this is for affordable housing and they may not be complying with whatever rents were given prior in the past. So it would have been nice to have the findings, I guess is my point, before voting on this letter. Okay.
Right. We are not controlling the schedule. We heard about this, I would say maybe a month ago, and we got the referral. Like things come from HPD all the time. They're not necessarily in timeline that we can manage.
Can we postpone the vote?
No, we have a 45-day time period to respond.
All right, Christine, did you have something else?
Yes. So Joe, when you explain the different slices, are we going to have the donut here, or are we, everything's going to be continuous and we don't drop everybody during the different tranches?
There is actually a donut hole here, Christine, between 58,000 for a single and 104 for a single. And that's because how the Hudson Yards voluntary inclusionary is set up. There is a donut hole in that voluntary inclusionary. And they also have to comply with Affordable New York. So what they've done is, even though it's higher in Hudson Yards, they've lowered it to try to mitigate it, but there's still going to be a donut hole. Yeah, I know it's one of those weird, it's an unintended effect because no one ever thought there'd be just taking the set. We have only gotten Hudson Yards units always at 60% of AMI. So this is our first experience with the 80%, 125 and 165.
Okay, thanks.
Betty.
Yeah, great letter, but three things. One thing is that the low-income people will have to pay $500 a year, as if I did the math correctly, for using certain spaces and facilities. It seems pretty steep.
Including the gym.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there would be some way you could segregate the gym from the outdoor space on the 8th floor. I don't know. It just seems like a bit much, but anyway.
No, Betty, all those spaces, the only fee was the gym. I read it as every other, like there's the lounge on the 8th floor, the 67th floor, and the terrace. All those were free. It was just the gym that had the fee. Did I misread it?
I think it's one more thing, Jeffrey. I think it might be the top thing. Let me just see.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
no, you are correct.
Because I was
It's the
going to
gym.
zoom in on that as well, Betty, but when it
It's
was
the
just
gym.
the
Yeah,
gym,
they
but
changed
you're not
it.
wrong.
At first, they
There was
wanted a
a fee
fee
for an
for the
indoor
top floor.
space. There was a fee for an indoor space, a lounge.
Yes, they changed that.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I didn't read it carefully enough. Anyway, the business of the 24 units not permanently affordable, could that not be put in this particular letter? You seem to indicate it shouldn't be, but it seems that's really important. And
No, we'd like to modify this letter because we learned this only yesterday.
so it will go in the letter.
Yes, we want to modify it, but we also want them to modify their letter to us.
Right. But I
Making
mean,
the commitment.
so
Right.
it will be. And then I continue to be kind of upset about the rent and the utility and that whole shebang, which apparently is being looked at more carefully. And I don't know if we could put some kind of footnote or a little statement that, there's this disagreement or something that needs to be resolved.
I think that makes sense, Betty. Yes.
Because a lot of people are very upset about
And I'm
Gotham.
going to rely upon Katie to produce that language. You should speak next, probably.
Great, thank you.
All right, Katie, floor is yours.
Thanks. Yes, I will speak to this issue, but I also want to be really clear, like, I haven't seen the letter that the public speaker sent earlier today, so I don't know the full scope of what she was
It was emailed to
referencing.
all of us.
Yeah, I just haven't seen it yet. So I don't know the full scope of what she was referencing. What I have been looking at and what I have drafted a letter about is the utility credits. And very specifically, so our community board has written 2 letters in the past. And the current letter that I've drafted for our committee to look at in 2 weeks is simply saying, hey, Gotham, you deleted the utility credit at both Gotham West and at the Nicole. It affected a lot of people. And then you actually said to everybody at Gotham West, hey, we're sorry. We know it's an issue that everybody's debating. We're not going to delete it anymore for you guys, and we're going to make it retroactive. It's not a problem. So we had sent a letter saying, hey, at the Nicole, do the same thing. That's all we're asking. We know it's being debated right now. We know that there's a lawsuit about it. Just in the interim, treat everybody at the Nicole the same way you're treating them at Gotham West. And in the past, Gotham had said, nope, we're only going to treat people at the Nicole that way if some of them file a complaint officially with the office of, I don't know, whatever it was. But basically they're saying only if they go through all the rigmarole of filing a complaint at the offices. And we're saying, come on, don't make people go through a process that's hard to do, especially during the pandemic.
Just
when
do it.
offices are
You're saying just do it.
just do it. So that's what our letter is going to say that we're going to look at next month. But I think I totally agree that if we're doing something right now and saying we're going to approve something for Gotham, we should absolutely say, hey, just do it. You know, you've said that you want to be a good neighbor. We're trusting you to be a good neighbor on this, but we know one specific instance right now where you're not being a good neighbor and you're not being a good partner, and we want you to fix this.
We want to set language about the dispute. That makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Perfect. I will draft that paragraph. So again, all we're doing right now, we're not weighing in any particular way. We're just saying treat everybody at the Gotham, I'm sorry, everybody at the Nicole, including retroactively, the same way you're treating people at Gotham West, which is to not delete this utility credit until it's resolved in court or whatever.
Right. Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks everyone for the work on this. Just quick process clarifying question following up on this whole Gotham issue. Joe, as I understand, right, this is like an as of right development. They're going to be the developer. And so really what we're just opining on the letter is their plan for the affordable housing component. So like they will be the developer regardless of frankly our position. Is that correct? Or am I misunderstanding the process here?
They own the site. They're purchasing from Covenant House as part of their financial deal with Covenant House. Our role is opining on the inclusionary housing portion, which is as of right, but we still get a referral because the zoning says we get a referral to opine on.
Okay, but it's just opining, negotiation. Got it. Okay, thank you, and agree. I think some language about the dispute would be great, so thank you.
Maria?
Thanks, Lowell. I had 3 points written down. One of them was the what I mentioned earlier. The other thing was the letter talks about, can we find out specifically how many beds are for youth in the Covenant House part? That's not in the letter.
Yeah, we have asked Covenant House. They haven't responded yet. That's why it's not there yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we know. The other thing I wanted.
Because again, remember, Maria, it's not, the site does not include that building. That's Covenant House is alone, but we'll just put it in there for reference.
And how many did they say? Just out of curiosity.
It's about, I don't know. That's the problem.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I thought I heard you say they already responded. Okay.
No, we asked, they haven't responded.
Oh, okay. The other thing was the amenities. Actually, I saw that it was going to be like $1,000 a month and discounted for
$1,000 a year.
Yeah. In the affordable unit, 50% discount, which is great. I don't get that here, but that's great. I wanted to ask, I saw in the letter, it says that it's going to be annual, an annual fee. And I'm wondering if that's also being broken down by month for people in the affordable units. I'm assuming that's a yes, but it's not in the letter. So
we should add that it should be monthly payments, right?
Yeah. Thanks. That's it.
Joseph.
Also, just one correction, Lowell.
Yes, sir.
Jeffrey, there's an error in the letter. There is a fee for the 45th floor terrace. We say no fee, and then they write back there's a fee. We have to reconcile that to see what's what with that.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
All right, Josephine.
So thank you for adding the line about the credit dispute for the utilities. Are you also going to add a line? I haven't seen this other letter about the rent dispute, so I'm just concerned about that. So
that is the rent dispute.
Okay, all right. It's all about the utilities, right? That's all she's, okay, fine. Thank you.
All right, JD.
Yeah, Joe, about the difference in the marketing for the refrigerators or whatever it is, I think we had discussed I understand it's a minor point, but I think we had spoken that this was not acceptable going down the road. Everything should be equal.
Yes, we noted here that in this case, it was fine, but I think one of the things we have to do, by the way, in a similar vein of everything else we talked about tonight, we had a draft of an inclusionary housing policy like we have for BLP. I think we want to bring this to our committee in October and review that and see if we can adopt it in a month or two. So it's the same thing. Everybody knows, here's what we expect. I think that's the way to go on this.
All right, anything else? Okay, we have 3 letters out of exec. I'll take the first one. Is the letter on the Independent Redistricting Commission. I want to make very clear, this is not a political letter. It refers to a Democratic plan and a Republican plan because that's what came out of the commission. The sole goal of this letter is to say, keep our districts whole. The Democratic Assembly plan basically keeps all of Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen together in one district, with the exception of the top couple of streets of Hell's Kitchen. The Republican plan splits Hell's Kitchen in half. On the Senate side, the Democratic plan splits Penn South in half into 2 different senatorial districts. And we say that that's ridiculous, whereas the Republican plan keeps the district pretty much intact. And that the main thrust of this letter is keep our communities intact in single districts and don't divide them up among districts. Christine.
From residents of 60th Street, that 60th Street is also in our district, and therefore we should change the description of our district from starting at 60th.
Okay. I think I wrote 59th just because I'm used to writing 59th.
Yeah, right, right.
Okay, so I'll change that to 60th.
Please.
Twee?
The last word on the second page, intact, in that spirit should be one word, not in then tact.
Yeah, all right, that's a typo, thank you.
No, it's an important one, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. The letter was put together pretty quickly. I didn't proofread it, quite honestly. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was actually going to call out the intact, and I was going to ask for a linear assembly district that includes the northern portion of CB4. And for historic context, Hell's Kitchen has been split in half by assembly districts for quite some time now. So this would be the first time in a long time that Hell's Kitchen would be included in one assembly district.
Yeah, that's the idea, is to please keep our neighborhoods in single districts. I know that Hell's Kitchen is currently split. We're trying to avoid that going forward because this is the one shot we have at saying that. I do want to point out that Betty gave me one comment to change Penn South to mutual redevelopment, which I'm going to do. Kit, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Well, this may be, or it may sound slightly semantical, but I'm on the website for the commission, and in the free class questions, one of the things that they say is the commission shall consider the maintenance of cores of existing districts of pre-existing political subdivisions, including counties, cities, towns, and communities of interest. I wonder if we want to mirror the language of communities of interest when we're defining what we want to preserve in our letter.
All right, I can add that. That's fine. Anything else? All right, I'll make those revisions. There are 2 more letters out of exec. They both relate to the open meeting law. Item 25 is actually the request to the state, what we were talking about earlier, that the open meetings law not, the suspension of the open meeting law not end in the middle of January. So we have some meetings in January that are on Zoom and some that are in person, that it should be extended. There are a lot of other fixes that the open meeting law needs, but we need to just push this out because they picked an arbitrary deadline that has no basis in reality. They just picked the date. So we need to get that fixed. And then the item 26, because our bylaws state that our elections are in person, we are basically doing what we did last year, advising the borough president that we will be conducting the board elections via Zoom. This is the way we have in the past. Any questions on 25 or 26? All right, that's it. Any new business? Twee, yes, go ahead, under the wire.
I'm trying to formulate my question for 25. Oh, because you're talking about it's an arbitrary date. But does that mean that there is an expected end date that will remain to be seen? Or because we mentioned about something hybrid, it's not clear what we're really asking.
Right. What the state legislature did when they came back at the beginning of September was they basically said, we're extending the suspension of the open meeting law till January 15th. There was no reason in hell that they picked January 15th, except it's the start of the next session. So there's a lot of fixes that need to be done to the open meeting law in terms of hybrid meetings, in terms of accessibility for open meetings that need to be addressed. And chances are those are not going to get addressed within the first week and a half of the legislative session. So the thrust of this letter is basically, look, push that out a little bit further so you can actually do good fixes to the open meeting law. Otherwise, we're going to be having our full board meeting at the beginning of January via Zoom, and the last couple of committee meetings will have to be in person because the law will expire. And we're trying to avoid that. Sarah?
Quick question. Does the legislative session just begin on the 15th? And I ask this just because I'm wondering, like, if there is a way that the legislature would have been able to meet and actually get a revised law passed, or whether it's impossible if that's like day one.
I don't know what their first date of the session is. It's Jeffrey, it's the Wednesday after New Year's or whatever the hell it is.
It's the 3rd, I believe.
Yeah, it's the 3rd or something.
Yeah, it's the 3rd.
There's no way, unless somebody is writing a bill right now and it gets introed on first day, that they are going to pass a law and it will be signed by the governor by January 15th. And they just don't work that way.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? All right.
Roll call.
Yes, I'm getting there. I know. The COVID want to get off this call already.
Procedurally, someone needs to make a motion for that to happen, just to be clear.
Move to engage roll call to consider the vote on the letter this evening.
Yeah.
Second it.
Second.
Without objection, the motion carries. All right. So I give this to Leslie and to Mike to call the roll. Again, for those of you who don't remember how we do this, you're voting on every item we just discussed. If you want to call out and vote no on something, or have to vote present, not eligible, call out that item. Otherwise, it's presumably yes on all or no on all or whatever, however you're feeling. But if you're voting differently, call out the items you're voting differently on.
Lowell and Jesse, do we need a separate roll call for the land use item from Chelsea Land Use that had a public session? No. A public meeting?
It's not a ULURP.
It's not a ULURP. We really limit that to ULURPs because that's the, yeah.
Okay, Leslie.
Tally ho.
Where is yours?
Okay.
I'm giving it to Mike.
Yeah, no, I'm going to read, and Leslie has the extra hand to use to write. But I'm going to remind everybody that at 12:42 today, Jesse sent out a link to the online vote sheet. You can actually open it now on your browser while I read, and you can fill it out and then send it in at the very end. There's no excuse for not opening it now and looking at it. So let me start from Sarah Appleton.
Yep, I'm gonna vote no on 25 and yes on everything else.
Okay, Ted Arenas. You still with us, Ted?
Yes to all.
Roberta Barnett.
Yes to all, abstain from 17, no on 18.
Christine Berthet.
Yes to all.
Gwen Billig.
Yes to all.
Wonderful. Leslie.
Yes to all.
Viren.
Yes to all.
Jessica Chait.
Yes to
She-
all.
Oh, thank you. Elzora,
Yes to all.
Dale Corvino,
Yes to all.
Marty Ducat,
Yes to all, no on 17.
Paul Devlin,
Yes to all.
Pete Diaz,
Yes to all except 17.
Tina,
Yes to all.
Wendy Gonzalez. I don't think she's here, is she? I don't think Jesse Greenwald is here either. Is that true?
Jesse is not.
Okay. Candace Hewitt,
Yes to all.
David Holoka,
Yes to all.
Frank,
Yes to all.
Josephine,
Abstain on 17, yes to the rest.
Peggy,
Yes to all.
Carrie Keenan,
Yes to all.
Blake,
Yes to all.
Bert. Bert is not here. Well, he's not available. Chris LeBron,
Yes to all.
Jeffrey,
Present, not eligible on 14. No on 18. Yes to the rest.
okay, Betty,
Yes to all.
Sarah Mills, is she here?
Yes to all.
Great. Tina Nelson,
Yes to all.
myself, Mike Noble, yes to all. JD,
Yes to all.
Maria Ortiz,
Yes to all.
Alan Oster,
Yes on all.
Brad Pascarella, is Brad here?
No, it doesn't sound like it.
No.
He
Twee,
was.
No.
He was.
yeah, he was. Twee,
Abstain on 10, yes to the rest.
Joe Restuccia,
Yes to all.
Sabrina,
17 present not eligible, 25 no, and yes to the rest.
Dolores Rubin,
Yes to all.
David Solnick,
Yes to all.
Katie Stokes,
Abstain on 17 and yes to the rest.
Kit Tullerson,
No on 17, yes on everything else.
Hector Vasquez,
Yes to all.
Marino Vikram,
Yes to all.
did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, very good. Rob Walker,
Yes to all.
James Wallace. I don't think he's here.
He's not.
Okay, David Warren,
Yay to all.
Leslie Williams,
Abstain on 17, yes to the rest.
Alice Wong. I don't see her. Okay, that leaves Lowell.
Yes to all.
Mike, I have a correction to make. I made
Yeah.
a mistake. No to 17, yes to all.
Thank you. I think that's it.
Everyone who's here had their vote, had their name called. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second
that.
Without objection, thank you all for coming.
You have to fill out your vote sheets as well. Make sure you fill out your vote sheets tonight. Do not wait 2 days. We count the
Email
votes.
is at 12:42 from Jesse, 12:42 email with the link.
Thank you,
That's
everyone.
right.
Bye, everybody.
Be safe and
Have a
healthy.
great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.